Chapter 1238. The inconspicuous Passat slowly entered Longhu Park. It followed the smooth and winding mountain road and stopped in front of Longhu Park's 21st building. The area surrounding the single-family villa had been transformed into a small courtyard. The area of the lawn had been reduced and turned into a few small vegetable fields. There were withered grape trellises next to the vegetable fields. Neatly trimmed potted plants were placed at the front door. Soft lights shone down from the courtyard. The night in front of Building 21 was leisurely. Wang Xiaoyao got out of the car, carrying the pork knuckle in soy sauce that he had just bought on the way as a side dish. Zhang Xiaohua, who came with him, opened Wang Xiaoyao's luggage and took out the gift that Wang Xiaoyao had prepared for Elder Xie. It was a square sandalwood box, square and heavy. In Wang Xiaoyao's luggage, this was probably the only thing of weight. The two of them walked to the gate of the villa one after another. A middle-aged man in a suit and leather shoes greeted them. He shook hands with them and said welcome with a warm smile, but with a hint of reluctance that could not be concealed. Wang Xiaoyao did not mind and said with a smile, "Brother Xie, are you staying at home recently?" "No, something came up, so I wanted to chat with the old man." Xie Dong shook his head. He was Xie Kuan's eldest son and was now the director of a bureau in the Ministry of Personnel of Zhongzhou State. 2 years ago, he was promoted to the rank of deputy governor. It was not very eye-catching in a deep-water government like the Ministry of Personnel, but it was a real power. In this year's general election, Xie Dong was very likely to become the deputy minister. His ranking might be low, but he could also protect the interests of the Southeast Group. Xie Dong's ability and status in the Southeast Group fully proved that he could get this position. The Southeast Group had been developing for hundreds of years, and it was impossible for every talented person to be a traitor. Wang Qinglei was the biggest mistake of the Southeast Group in the past 20 years, but more people like Xie Dong, who was trusted and did not betray this trust, were the backbone of the group. If he could become the deputy minister of the Ministry of Personnel this year, he would be one of the most influential representatives of the Southeast Group in the Ministry of Personnel, and his future could be said to be bright. At this time, a traitor like Wang Xiaoyao came to his house. Not to mention whether it would affect the views of the Southeast Group's big shots on him, Xie Dong would not welcome them. At this time, Wang Xiaoyao's appearance here might be to do his father's work. "Elder Xie, do you want to see me?" Wang Xiaoyao asked with a smile. Of course, the old man was in a good mood and personally made a few dishes to go with the wine. "Xiaoyao, Department Head Zhang, please come in." "I still have a meeting, so I won't be accompanying you." The corners of Xie Dong's mouth twitched. His smiling face looked like it was the real deal, but his tone was neither cold nor warm. There was a hint of vigilance as he maintained his distance. Wang Xiaoyao nodded, and the two of them brushed past each other. Wang Xiaoyao walked into the villa and suddenly whispered, "Brother Xie has the ability to work." It's not an exaggeration to describe him as smart and capable. However, his breadth of mind was inevitably lacking. If it was 10 years ago, it would have been fine, but now it was still the same. Elder Xie was inevitably disappointed. This kind of person is very suitable to serve in the army, but to be in charge of a region and to be a high-ranking official, he is somewhat unqualified. Brother Xie is the best assistant. I'm afraid I'll only end up harming myself and others if I take up the post. The corner of Zhang Xiaohua's mouth twitched, but she didn't say anything. "You brat, did you say those words on purpose for this old man to hear?" In the dining room, an old but vigorous voice rang out. Wang Xiaoyao smiled mischievously. "Elder Xie really has a sharp ear and eyes. Just listen to my unintentional words." Brother Xie was cold and indifferent at the door just now. "Since I'm not welcome, then I must retaliate. Get in." In the dining room, the old man laughed and scolded. Wang Xiaoyao and Zhang Xiaohua looked at each other and walked into the villa dining room. Wine glasses had been placed on the clean and tidy marble table, and the special maodai had just been opened. There was a stack of peanuts, stir-fried cabbage, stir-fried meat with green peppers, and a salad tomato. The old man, who was already a little stooped, held the wine glass and drank slowly. It seemed that he had been waiting for a long time. Seeing Wang Xiaoyao come in, Xie Kuan, whose face already had age spots, twitched the corners of his mouth. There is obviously a problem with your current position. How dare that kid get too close to you? He has long been dissatisfied with some of Wu Yue's problems in the past few years, and he is not optimistic about Wang Qinglei. It's good enough for him to give you a smile when you come here now. Do you still want him to drink and chat with you? He put the wine glass in his hand on the table and sighed softly. But what you said is also reasonable. My son is more than enough to be an assistant. It's indeed not enough to take charge of an area alone. He can control the details, but in terms of the overall situation. He shook his head. A city in Yuzhou can also be replaced by someone who ascends to heaven. Your prestige is still there. Brother Xie's future is not hindered. Wang Xiaoyao said quietly. Xie Kuan had 3 children in his life, 2 boys and 1 girl. His daughter was now the dean of a college in Huaqing University and a famous professor in the Ministry of Education. She had students all over the world. His second son had no interest in an official career and was doing business in the southeast. He had no great wisdom. However, Elder Xie's position in the southeast group and the care of the Wang family of Beihai were enough to make Elder Xie's youngest son a rich man. In such a situation, his eldest son, Xie Dong, was his successor. But as Wang Xiaoyao said, Xie Dong's working ability was extremely strong, but his vision was a little low. It was difficult for him to really take charge of an area alone. This defect had been exposed little by little when Xie Dong was at the grassroots level. Although he had made a lot of progress in these years, his character made him too easy to study the details. It was not easy to change. Therefore, Xie Kun brought him to the Ministry of Personnel. Obviously, he intended to let Xie Dong take another path. If everything went well this year, Xie Dong would be promoted to the Governor-General in the position of Deputy of the Ministry of Personnel. 5 years later, he would be transferred to the Ministry of Supervision. It was indeed a defect for the eldest son to take charge of an area alone. But if he was a deputy, he could be anyone's right-hand man. As Xie Kuan's successor, Xie Kuan had to push his eldest son into the parliament. In all the provinces and departments of Zhongzhou State, there were only 2 places that could accommodate deputies at the level of councillors. The first was the first deputy of the Ministry of Supervision, and the second was the first deputy of the National Parliament. Xie Kuan used to be a councillor and controlled the Ministry of Supervision. The Ministry of Supervision had always been the traditional area of the Southeast Group. Therefore, becoming the first deputy of the Ministry of Supervision and smoothly entering the parliament was Xie Dong's future direction. Xie Kun glanced at Wang Xiaoyao and did not say much. He simply said, "Sit down." Wang Xiaoyao handed the pork knuckle in his hand to Zhang Xiaohua. When she took the cooked food to the kitchen, he opened the gift he brought this time. In the square box was a piece of top-grade Hetian jade with a warm and soft color. "Senior Xie, I know you like to make seals. What do you think of this material? It took me a lot of effort to get it. It can make about 5 seals. I want 3, and the remaining 2 will be the handling fee. What do you think?" Wang Xiaoyao said with a smile. Xie Kuan was stunned. Looking at the top-grade Hetian jade in front of him, his eyes were soft and happy. He carefully took the box and played with the jade inside. After a while, he said calmly, 3 seals? Who are you going to give them to?" "Of course I want one." "Well, Chu Jiangchao from Huading. You should know him. Like you, he is also very fond of all kinds of seals. I plan to give 1 to him and the 3rd to Qinglei." Wang Xiaoyao replied. Xie Kuan played with the jade with a faint smile. He used to be a council member of Zhongzhou State and the Minister of Supervision. Before becoming a council member, he was the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel when he served as a member of Parliament. Because of this, he could have such a strong influence in the Southeast Group. He was so powerful that even though he had retired for more than 10 years, he could rely on his remaining power to push his not-so-outstanding son into the Parliament. With his identity, the significance of giving a seal was by no means ordinary. There was no doubt that Wang Xiaoyao was telling him clearly that he needed his support. The sound of Zhang Xiaohua cutting cooked food came from the kitchen. Xie Kuan was silent for a while and said lightly, "Do you want to intervene in Wu Yue's affairs?" "Old Ji is a little anxious." Wang Xiaoyao said slowly, Wu can't be chaotic. For you and Wang Qinglei, it can't be chaotic. Xie Kun said quietly, now there are many voices inside. Although the opinions are different, they are generally the same. You want me to support you, but how can I explain to them? When communicated with me yesterday, he wants Lu Xiangyang to go to Wuyue, and I didn't object. Wang Xiaoyao's pupils contracted slightly. He was no stranger to the name of Lu Xiangyang. He was a deputy governor inspector of the Ministry of Supervision. His rank was very high, but he had no specific position in the Ministry of Supervision. It seemed to be an idle position. But in fact, in a special government like the Ministry of Supervision, this kind of inspector with rank but no obvious real power was the real main force of supervision. Lu Xiangyang was Ji Wenxiang's confidant and also a fierce tiger beside him. He was experienced and full of courage. By putting him in Wuyue, Ji Wenxiang obviously planned to fight with Wang Qinglei to the death in the last period of the election. I know this person. Wang Xiaoyao smiled and said, but I think it's more appropriate to put him in Huading. Lu Xiangyang could never go to Wuyue. With his ability and the fact that he was ordered to make trouble, he could almost be unscrupulous. In the situation where the whole Wuyue was in a panic, Wang Qinglei wanted to go further, but there was great resistance. Huading is peaceful. What can he do there? Xie Kun ate a peanut with a smile. Wang Xiaoyao gently gritted his teeth. He was seeking Xie Kun's support. And Xie Kun was now forcing him to play his trump card. His and Wang Qinglei's bottom line was to keep Wuyue. For this reason, they had to give up Yu Chuanguang's team in Huading, transfer the core force to Wuyue to stabilize the situation, and give the interests in Huading to the Southeast Group. But obviously, this little interest could not make Xie Kun support Wang Xiaoyao. Putting Lu Xiangyang in Wuyue was to let him make trouble and make Wang Qinglei anxious. This itself was beneficial to the Southeast Group. If they could take the opportunity to take back part of Wuyue's power, it would be even more beneficial. The Southeast Group would also gain something by transferring Chu Jiangchao to Wuyue and letting Lu Xiangyang go to Huading, but it was only a position in the Ministry of Supervision. Lu Xiangyang wanted to make trouble. But what were the conditions and bargaining chips? What Xie Kun wanted from Wang Xiaoyao now was this bargaining chip. This was a transaction with a clear price. Wang Xiaoyao wanted Wuyue. The Southeast Group could give it to him, but what they wanted was not the little interest Wang Xiaoyao had in Huading. After they gave up Wuyue, their strategic goal was the whole Huading. Exchanging Huading for Wuyue, such a deal was fair and acceptable to both sides. Wang Xiaoyao might not be able to directly hand over the whole Huading to the Southeast Group, but the bargaining chips he gave must let the Southeast Group see that they had the hope to take over Huading. Wang Xiaoyao had been operating in Huading for many years, so he definitely had such bargaining chips. The key was whether he dared to give it to him. Huading was now the backyard of no group, and the forces of all the major groups had infiltrated it. But the current speaker of Huading was one of the leaders of the Prince Group, and the Prince Group had a great advantage in influence in Huading. Wang Xiaoyao's bargaining chips were undoubtedly tantamount to attacking everything of the Prince Group in Huading. Coincidentally, after he and Wang Qinglei betrayed Mount Dibing, they joined the Prince Group. Chapter 1239. So, there's still no news at the moment? In the luxurious palace where Wang Xingshao lived on Mount Dibing, he looked at Xian Ming and asked softly, holding his sleeping son in one hand. No. I contacted the military counselor of Emperor Dong's palace a few months ago and kept in touch recently. They also have no news of the little princess. Xian Ming, who was in charge of all the intelligence work of the Wang family of Beihai on Mount Dibing, shook his head and looked a little pale. There was some tiredness in Wang Xingxiao's eyes. After a moment of silence, he asked softly, "What did Li Tianlan say?" Xian Ming was stunned and said in a low voice, "He said nothing." However, the recent actions of Emperor Dong's palace are obvious. Keep looking. Wang Xingxiao took a deep breath and said, "Find out where she is and who else besides us and Emperor Dong's palace." His eyes were extremely cold. Who on earth is looking for her? It had been nearly 3 years since Wang Yuetong left Mount Dibing. Since Li Tianlan swept across Beihai from Autumn Water to Mount Dibing in Xingzhou, Wang Yuetong disappeared from everyone's sight. For nearly 3 years, both the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace had never given up looking for her. Northeast, Yuzhou, Beihai, Yanzhou, Dongshan, Huading, Jiangxia, and even Tianan. The people in charge of the intelligence of the two superpowers kept sorting out all kinds of details, but they never found any effective clues. But Wang Xianxiao and Li Tianlan did not forget her. The most important thing was that the enemies of the two superpowers also did not forget Wang Yuetong. Chen Fangqing's original plan termination was mainly aimed at Wang Yuetong, and the fierce reaction of the Wang family of Beihai caused the most serious conflict in decades between Mount Dibing and Zhongzhou State. Although the situation was under control, the rift between the two sides was getting deeper and deeper. With the rise of the Aurora Legion in Snow Country, the Beihai Corps began to recruit soldiers from Beihai Province under Wang Xianxiao's order. Today, although the Beihai Corps had lost some of its core elite combat forces, its overall size had changed from 200,000 to a super corps with a total size close to the Border Control Corps and nearly 500,000 soldiers. After the planned termination was exposed, Li Tianlan's reaction was also fierce and vicious. The death of Qin Fangqing's daughter and granddaughter was a beginning. Chen Fangqing and Qin Shi's deaths were not the end either. It hadn't been long since Qin Fangqing's death, but the Chen family had been losing members during this period of time. The former young mistress of the Qin family, Murong Xiu, was not punished after her affair with Wang Lin was exposed. The next day, she was taken to Tianan. Now, it was said that she was the treasurer of the Xianyuan City branch of Sky City, a top-notch club under the Emperor Dong's palace. Countless people in Xianyuan City expressed a strong interest in this young lady of the Chen family. Although no one could get her yet, they were just waiting for the right price. It could be imagined what would happen to Murong Xiu in the future. The disgraced Yuan Lin committed suicide on the second day after the trial. Whether it was true or not, at least that was the conclusion. It was said that Chen Fangqing's grandson, who had just entered university, owed a huge gambling debt overseas and was retaliated against by the underworld forces overseas. He was shot 16 times and forced to die. Nearly 20 of Chen Fangqing's relatives had met with accidents one after another in this short period of time. Car accidents, murders, suicides, and all kinds of other things were happening one after another. Today, the entire Chen clan had completely withered away, and the few remaining core members probably wouldn't be able to live for long. Li Tianlan's arrogant and almost unscrupulous revenge completely revealed a posture of madness. His attitude was very obvious, that was, he wanted to completely destroy the Chen family. The prince group had also made a symbolic intervention. However, after a certain general who couldn't stand the Chen family's plight expressed his opinion and disappeared with his family that night, the entire prince group no longer paid any attention to the Chen family, which was no longer of any use. The cause of all this could be said to be the plan of termination proposed by Chen Fangqing. It was a good name, because although this plan did not end Wang Yuetong, it succeeded in ending his family. But with such bloody means before until today, there were still people who wanted to get Wang Yuetong. 3 days ago, the intelligence agency of the Wang family of Beihai received accurate information that in addition to their own people looking for Wang Yuetong, there were other people looking for her. This was not surprising, and it would not be exposed in a short time. After all, Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai had always had clues. But the key was that in order not to cause any misunderstanding, Xian Ming and military counselor had been in touch with each other not frequently but not estranged from looking for Wang Yuetong. After confirming that those people did not belong to Emperor Dong's palace, Xian Ming and military counselor were completely nervous. Wang Yuetong was undoubtedly one of the untouchable reverse scales of the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace. Although she seemed to have nothing to do with them, the two superpowers cared about her, which could be seen from their tireless search for her in the past 3 years. The consequences of this exposure were absolutely disastrous. But if they could control Wang Yuetong in advance, it was foreseeable that the gain would also be incomparably huge. A crisis was an absolute danger and a great opportunity. In Zhongzhou State. At this time, too many people wanted to know Wang Yuetong's whereabouts. At the very least, if they found Wang Yuetong, even if they did not dare to hurt her, they could tell the two superpowers about her information in exchange for endless benefits. Fishing in troubled waters. Wang Yuetong was undoubtedly one of the big fish now. Who is looking for Yuetong? Have you found out? Wang Xianxia asked faintly. No. Xian Ming was a little helpless. The other party looked very alert and did not leave any clues. There are really people who don't know what's good for them. Wang Xianxia sneered. Continue to investigate. Don't miss any clues. I want to see who is so bold. If we want to find Yuetong, we can't miss the clues of that group of people. Xian Ming nodded and did not speak. Is it possible that it is the academics? Wang Xianxia suddenly asked. It's not very likely. Xian Ming thought for a while and shook his head. Your Highness, I don't know if you have noticed that although the academics and Emperor Dong's palace are still in a deadlock recently, their relationship seems to be easing. At this time, if the academics look for the little princess, they will lose more than they gain. Even if they have other purposes for us, they won't provoke Li Tianlun. That makes sense. Wang Xianxia nodded. But we still need to pay attention to what we should. We can't be careless. Xian Ming grunted. That silly girl is too stubborn. I don't know how much she has suffered outside these years. She has been spoiled since she was a child. He did not continue, but there was unconcealable worry in his eyes. Xian Ming wanted to say something but stopped. Then he was shocked and suddenly shut up. No one knew how powerful the intelligence network of the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace was. They had not found anyone for nearly 3 years. Xian Ming's bad feeling was getting stronger and stronger. Wang Yuetong was not in the thunder-shocking realm when she left Beihai. In this realm, she was an expert in the outside world, but she was definitely not an unsolvable expert. If there was really an accident, Xian Ming shook his head suddenly. Wang Xianxia glanced at him coldly and said in a cold voice, "What do you want to say?" "Nothing." Xian Ming smiled bitterly. "Get out." Wang Xianxia's voice was cold. "Continue to investigate. No matter how much it costs, you must find her." Chapter 1240. I'll go to Huading or Tianan in the near future to contact military counselor in person and strengthen our cooperation. Xian Ming said slowly, "Did the little princess take any money when she left Beihai?" Wang Xianxia shook his head. The last time she withdrew money was on the 3rd day after she left Beihai. She was in Yuzhou and withdrew 30,000 yuan. My mother gave her a bank card, and she never touched it again. In the past few years, we have searched almost all the major cities we should look for, but we have no clues. If we continue to look for her, we can only continue to look for her in all the cities and even counties in the country. In short, I'll do my best." Xian Ming smiled bitterly and shook his head subconsciously. Zhongzhou State was a vast land with abundant resources. If a person with extraordinary strength was determined to hide, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. After all, Wang Yuetong was different from a wanted criminal. No matter how difficult it was to deal with a wanted criminal, he would leave some clues and traces. But Wang Yuetong did not conform to the law of hiding. If she changed her identity, it would be difficult to find her in a lifetime. Li Tianlan has talked to Zhou Yunhai about this matter. The police department is also working hard. It is said that the cabinet has a plan to promote a new census. The police department has issued the document. I hope there will be clues as soon as possible. Xian Ming said softly. Wang Xianxia was silent. The police department issued a notice to look for Wang Yuetong. It could be said that the whole country was looking for Wang Yuetong. Li Tianlan and Zhou Yunhai were getting closer and closer, and the new group was getting more and more mature. Wang Xianxia could clearly feel the power in his words and deeds. If there are no clues, we can change our direction. He said calmly, find out who is inquiring about Yuetong. If we want to protect her, we don't have to find her. It's the same to control those who dare to have ideas about her. Xian Ming was stunned and nodded. Although it was not easy, it was much easier than looking for a person with no clues. He thought for a while and suddenly said softly, Your Highness, if you really find the little princess, Do you want her to go back to Mount Dibing? Or do you want her to go back to the Wang family of Beihai? Wang Xianxia was stunned and did not speak for a while. Xian Ming looked at him and said nothing. It might be too early to talk about this topic, but it was definitely a problem that could not be avoided. Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace attached great importance to Wang Yuetong. They had been looking for her since she disappeared and never gave up. The Wang family of Beihai also never gave up. Now that she had not been found, the two sides could cooperate on this issue and even exchange information. But once Wang Yuetong was found, everything would be different. There was no doubt that Wang Yuetong had become a key figure between the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace. Once her whereabouts were confirmed, her existence could cause the two great powers to become more harmonious. At the same time, it was possible for the two great powers to erupt into even more intense conflicts. Xian Ming could imagine Wang Yuetong's dilemma. If it wasn't so difficult, she wouldn't have been hiding all this time. Wang Xianxia was silent for a long time before he said softly, "I respect her choice. No matter what, it's good that you're safe." Xian Ming nodded. Now Wang Xianxia had the strength to let Wang Yuetong choose freely. Maybe he was still not Li Tianlan's match, but it was not easy for Li Tianlan to kill him. If they were on Mount Dibing, his personal combat capability was only a little weaker than Li Tianlan's. He was capable of protecting both Wang Yuetong and the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Xianxia shook his head and got rid of all the messy thoughts in his mind. He said softly, "Go to your work." Xian Ming turned and left. Wang Xianxia sat quietly in his seat. After a while, he lowered his head and looked at his sleeping son in his arms. His little body was curled up, and he was sucking a finger with his little mouth. Wang Xianxia smiled and reached out to touch his face gently. His eyes were unprecedentedly soft. Light footsteps could be heard coming from upstairs. Song Ci in pajamas slowly went downstairs and said softly, "Is Xian Ming gone? Is there any news of Yuetong?" Wang Xianxia shook his head, sighed and murmured, "Who knows where that girl is?" Song Ci took her son from Wang Xianxiao's arms and said softly, "Don't worry." When Yuetong left, she was already at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. In the past few years, even if she didn't meditate, she could smoothly enter the thunder-shocking realm. Even if she encountered an accident, she could completely match an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in a short time. How many experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm are there in the entire Zhongzhou state? And they must know her. Until now, there has been no news, which can only mean that Yuetong is not in any danger. She is very safe now. I'm not worried about her safety, but it's unreasonable for her to be floating outside all the time. Wang Xianxia said helplessly, "Even if she really went to Emperor Dong's palace now, I'll accept it. Maybe she still can't figure it out." Song Ci said softly, "But she will figure it out eventually. When she figures it out, she will be mature." Wang Xianxia nodded silently. "Let's go to rest." Song Ci smiled and stretched out her small hand to pull Wang Xianxiao's sleeve. Her voice was hoarse, with a touch of faint charm. "He said he would accompany me tonight." A faint sounded voice suddenly sounded from the upstairs corridor. Song Ci and Wang Xianxia looked up at the same time. In the corridor on the second floor, Tang Shi, who now controlled the huge economy of the Wang family of Beihai and was Wang Xianxiao's fiancé in terms of identity, stood there quietly, looking down at them. There was no expression on her beautiful face. Wang Xianxia coughed dryly. "Sleep?" Tang Shi looked at Wang Xianxia and asked in a lukewarm voice. Wang Xianxia was a little confused. The relationship between Tang Shi and Song Ci had never been harmonious. Her mother had mentioned that during the 2 years they had left Mount Dibing, the relationship between the two was not bad. Song Ci was pregnant for 10 months. Tang Shi took good care of her and was very fond of their son, Haoqian. As Wang Xianxiao's strength soared, they returned to Mount Dibing. The relationship between the two seemed to be back to before they left Mount Dibing, or even better. Song Ci had already carried on the Wang family of Beihai. When Tang Shi was alone with Wang Xianxiao, she clearly said that she also wanted a child. In terms of time, today was the right day. After Song Ci gave birth to a child, Her needs seemed to be much greater than before. She was unwilling to let him go easily, saying that no one took care of the child in the middle of the night. However, the three of them lived together now. When the two women faced each other, it was really a battle of swords all the time. Choose one yourself. Xianxia held her son and looked at Wang Xianxia with a smile, dignified and charming. Ahem, Wang Xianxia coughed dryly. Well, that... Before he could finish his words, his phone rang as if it was a life-saving call. Wang Xianxiao's face suddenly changed. He took out his cell phone and said with a smile, "I'll answer the call first." Senior Xia's words flashed on the screen. Wang Xianxiao narrowed his eyes and immediately answered the call, whispering, "Senior Xia." Xie Kun chuckled at the other end of the phone and said directly, "Xiaoyao just left my place. Now you can act." Wang Xianxiao took a deep breath, nodded, and said calmly, "I see. Senior Xie, thank you for your hard work." Xie Kun hung up the phone with a smile. Wang Xianxiao put down his cell phone and looked at the two beautiful women who were looking at each other and trying to kill each other with their eyes. He said with a smile, "You two can sleep tonight. Sure, move in. When Haotian wakes up tonight, you can help take care of him." "Where are you going?" Tang Shi and Song Ci turned their heads at the same time and looked at Wang Xianxiao. Wang Xianxiao played with his cell phone and said calmly, "To Beihai Prison." Chapter 1241. The invisible submarine gradually sank on the surface of the sea. The roaring and undulating waves gradually became quiet, the light was getting weaker, and the surroundings began to become dark and quiet. Under the tremendous pressure, the water in the ocean was like a solid painting that had solidified. The submarine's light pierced the darkness of the deep sea and kept moving forward according to the instructions of the radar. In the small room of the well-lit submarine, Wang Xianxiao silently looked at the flashing signal on the screen in front of him, looking extremely patient and calm. Beihai Prison was one of the most expensive projects of the Wang family of Beihai in hundreds of years, and it naturally became the most secret prison in the world. Its protective measures were much more exaggerated than those of the desert prison in Zhongzhou State. This prison built in the deep sea was not big, and its original intention was not to be a large prison. Its small scale could be said to be exquisite, and it could probably only hold less than 200 prisoners inside. But to be able to build a stable prison in the deep sea, in addition to the huge funds behind it, it also proved that the Wang family of Beihai had almost the top technical level in this regard. Large-scale deep-sea operations of more than 600 meters underwater, not to mention when Beihai Prison was established, even today, few countries in the world could do it. The prison was far away from Beihai. It was a disc-shaped building. This small-scale prison was insanely equipped with nearly 400 sets of automatic weapon systems, which could be said to be armed to the teeth. Under such circumstances, not to mention the low possibility of a fugitive or the survival problem of the other party under the great pressure of the deep sea, even if someone could really do these two things, with more than 400 sets of weapon systems, Beihai only needed to press a button to completely destroy all life within 10 nautical miles around the prison in just a few seconds. This prison had been completed for more than 200 years. It was originally proposed by the chosen one of Beihai's ancestors. After generations of continuous hard work and debugging, it took hundreds of years to build Beihai Prison. Today, it was in a state of huge loss. The word loss had nothing to do with the prison. But extremely special prisons like Beihai Prison and the Desert Prison all took on a different mission. This prison was special. This also meant that the prisoners who were qualified to be imprisoned here were also special. And for the big forces like Zhongzhou State or the Wang family of Beihai, such specialness also meant extraordinary benefits. Ordinary prisoners were not qualified to be imprisoned here at all. For the prisoners who were qualified to be locked up here, perhaps a casual word from them could be invaluable information, which could make the Wang family of Beihai gain a lot. North Sea Prison had been built for more than 200 years, and it had locked up a total of 70 prisoners. They were famous traders who were branded in the history books, top secret agents who controlled huge resources, the founder and inventor of a certain cutting-edge technology, the master of a super force in the dark world, the elusive killer, the infamous Kong Bu. In addition, two patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai had successfully broken through to the peak of the invincible realm. There were also two patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai who broke the limit of the thunder-shocking realm and stepped into the domain of the invincible realm. The existence of the North Sea prison was a legend to North Sea, and it had extraordinary significance. No one could deny the great contribution this place had made to the North Sea. But the truth was undeniable. Since the establishment of North Sea prison, it had always been in a state of loss. For more than 200 years, Beihai had trained invincible realm experts here and obtained unimaginable benefits from every prisoner here. Their status had gradually improved, and their power had been expanding. But all these gains were still not comparable to the terrifying cost of establishing Beihai prison and the annual maintenance cost invested in Beihai prison to this day. How much did it cost to build North Sea prison? From the time when the chosen one of Beihai's ancestors put forward the idea, to the time when the second patriarch took over the power of the Wang family of Beihai, North Sea prison had burned nearly 80 billion. It was star dollars. At that time, the Zhongzhou dollar had not appreciated according to the economic trend. At that time, 80 billion star dollars was equivalent to more than 400 billion Zhongzhou dollars. And what did they get by burning this money? It was not North Sea prison, not even the prototype of North Sea prison. The more than 400 billion was a lot of experimental data, as well as a prison model that existed in theory and drawings. The burning of money had started at that time. Then 100 years, 200 years, 250 years. It was burning money every year. The Zhongzhou dollar was appreciating. Now, one Zhongzhou dollar was equivalent to 3 star dollars. During the hundreds of years of the entire North Sea prison, from concept to construction to completion to maintenance, the Wang family of Beihai had burned nearly 3 trillion Zhongzhou dollars. 3 trillion. And it was just the data published on the surface. As the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, Wang Xianxia knew that this data was greatly exaggerated. In fact, the cost was more than twice the published data. This was equivalent to the wealth created by the Wang family of Beihai for decades at its peak. Until now, the Wang family of Beihai had to invest tens of billions of Zhongzhou dollars every year in order to maintain North Sea prison, update equipment, and set up weapons. This was just daily maintenance. This was one of the most expensive projects of the Wang family of Beihai since its establishment. There were only 2 projects that could compare with the cost of North Sea prison in the entire North Sea. The first was the North Sea Refuge, and the second was the numerous laboratory projects in North Sea. The entire Dark World had different comments on North Sea prison. But one thing was undeniable. If the Wang family of Beihai had not built North Sea prison, or if the construction requirements had been lower and the unimaginable wealth had been used on its own expansion, the Wang family of Beihai today would definitely be stronger than it was now. Many people thought that North Sea prison was a joke. It was even a product of the Wang family of Beihai showing off its strength and wealth. Even many people of the Wang family of Beihai thought so. Except for the patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai. Today's Wang family of Beihai, perhaps even Summer Solstice, did not understand what North Sea prison meant. As the patriarch, Wang Xianxia knew very well that this was a trump card and also the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai. Beihai used the wealth that could make it stronger to create North Sea prison. It did give up some things, but one day it would get more. Just like the day he met Lin Shi. They went from Tiannan to West Africa, and from Africa to Beihai. When they came to North Sea prison, those people gave the same comments. On that day, Lin Shi stood in the submarine and looked at the outline of North Sea prison. After a long silence, he said, "What is this?" And the apostle who followed him said with a smile, "This is a very interesting thing." To be exact, if the current technology does not develop explosively, this is a trump card that can ensure that the Wang family of Beihai will stand at the peak for 1,000 years. This was the apostle's comment. Chapter 1242. The submarine continued to move forward. On the screen, the small green dot representing the submarine was infinitely close to the small red dot of the destination. The surroundings suddenly became extremely quiet. The slightly dull sound of water flow completely disappeared at a certain moment, and so did the sound of the submarine running. The two lampposts that had been illuminating the dark deep sea became scattered at the same time as all the sound disappeared. The dazzling light scattered into dense spots of light. The submarine shook violently in silence. The engine instantly lost control and began to fall. Inside the submarine, Wang Xianxia, who was standing quietly in front of the screen, flicked his fingers. A stream of sword energy passed through the submarine and merged with the outside world. The submarine's falling momentum stopped, and then the whole submarine seemed to be pulled by an external force and began to accelerate. Wang Xianxiao's aura continued to rise. In the blink of an eye, the whole submarine was filled with sword intent. He stood quietly, spreading his sword intent to feel the environment outside the submarine. This was the deep sea hundreds of meters below. But there was no seawater at all within 10,000 meters of the submarine. The huge outline of North Sea Prison was constantly becoming clearer under the perception of Wang Xianxiao's sword intent. With North Sea Prison as the center, every 3 to 5 seconds, there would be an incredible stream of sword energy spreading out from North Sea Prison. The mighty sword chi swept about, tearing apart the space within 10,000 meters around the prison, tearing apart every drop of seawater. The unimaginable sword chi kept whistling, opening up a vacuum of 10,000 meters in the deep sea, which was hundreds of meters deep. The sword energy rose in North Sea Prison and swept to the edge of the vacuum and seawater. The deep sea was constantly turbulent with the sword energy, forming a huge whirlpool of 10,000 meters in the deep sea. The whirlpool rushed straight to the surface of the sea with a terrifying undercurrent, and the entire nearby sea was surging. Wang Xianxiao's submarine had already left the sea at this time and was pulled closer by the sword energy of North Sea Prison in the vacuum state. The sword energy was whistling and turbulent silently. Within the scope of the sword energy, all sounds were completely suppressed. Even light was torn apart by the ubiquitous but invisible sword energy and scattered everywhere. Wang Xianxia could sense the surging and roaring of the endless seawater at the edge of the sword energy. It was the power of the endless ocean, which turned into a whirlpool and an undercurrent, spreading from the deep sea to the surface. It was like the breathing of the sea. But to be more precise, it was the breathing of the Sword Emperor. Chaos in Snow Country. Since the end, Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong's whereabouts had been unknown. There had been countless speculations about what had happened to Wang Tianzong in the Dark World. Some people said that he had been seriously injured by the Eternal Sword and his martial arts foundation had been completely destroyed. Instead of returning to Beihai, he had been left to fend for himself in a corner. Some people said that Wang Tianzong was seriously injured and dying, and he was hiding in Beihai to recover. Some people also said that Wang Tianzong had died, but the Wang family of Beihai kept it a secret. There were many speculations. But no one knew where Wang Tianzong was. Only a few core people on Mount Dibing knew. Wang Tianzong had been secretly recuperating in Beihai Prison. This was the safest place in the Wang family of Beihai. In other words, it was a place that could guarantee that Wang Tianzong would not be affected by any external force. Before he officially woke up, this place was the strongest barrier of the Wang family of Beihai. Everything in front of him could prove Wang Tianzong's situation at this time, and it could also prove the strength of the Chosen One. The sword light that crisscrossed the deep sea showed that Wang Tianzong had recovered his consciousness to a certain extent, but his kendo and will were always out of control, so such a horrible scene was created. The sword energy coat on Wang Xianxia, which allowed him to fight Li Tianlan alone, was also the greatest gift of Wang Tianzong, who was in a trance, to the Wang family of Beihai, and it was also all he could do at present. This showed that Wang Tianzong was still struggling on the edge of life and death. Even so, in a seriously injured state, Wang Tianzong, who had recovered some consciousness, was still showing his strength. His kendo and will, which were out of control, were constantly fighting against the whole sea area around him as he breathed. As the vacuum of Beihai Prison grew bigger and bigger, Wang Tianzong's kendo and will would slowly recover little by little. When this vacuum suddenly disappeared one day, it was likely that Wang Tianzong's consciousness would be fully recovered and he would be able to use his kendo and will initially. So every time he saw this scene, Wang Xianxia always felt very at ease. The sword energy surging out of Beihai prison was so turbulent, which meant that his father's condition was getting better little by little. Today's Wang family of Beihai, because of the sword energy coat, did not lack the top combat capability. But in Wang Xiangxiao's heart he still could not be regarded as the pillar of Mount Dibing. The pillar that could support Mount Dibing, the entire Beihai province, and the pride of more than 20 million people in Beihai was still his father. Li Tianlan was invincible. Li Tianlan's kendo was perfect. Xianyuan Feng's sharpness shocked the world. All of this was a fact that could be seen by the whole world. But Wang Xiangxiao was very clear, and Wang Xiangxiao believed that Li Tianlan also knew that no matter how fancy Emperor Dong's palace was now, Li Tianlan's invincible name was only because Wang Tianzong did not show up. Li Tianlan was indeed very strong now. But at present, he was not a match for the chosen one. Even if he had Xianyuan Feng, which was full of energy, he could not. Wang Xiangxiao sighed softly, and his eyes shone. Endless sword energy surged out from his body and completely merged with the sword energy of Beihai prison. The sword energy coat on his body quickly recovered to its peak state. In this vacuum, because the sword energy was of the same origin, Wang Xiangxiao and everyone on the ship also regained the ability to move and breathe freely. The submarine was pulled close to Beihai prison by the sword energy. In a vacuum without seawater, the submarine and the prison gate opened at the same time. Shrouded by the familiar sword energy, Wang Xiangxiao, who was completely relaxed, walked into the prison. Small and gentle electric lights hung in the bronze-colored corridor of the prison. The ordinary-looking but extraordinarily charming female saint stood at the end of the corridor to greet him. Seeing Wang Xiangxiao coming over, she nodded gently and said in a flat tone, "Come to visit His Majesty?" The Wang family of Beihai provided the foundation of Lin Shi's group of 3 in West Africa. In return, Saint was responsible for making Wang Tianzong recover. This was a sincere cooperation between both sides, and no one played tricks. Hundreds of thousands of troops belonging to the Wang family of Beihai in the West African Divine Martial Corps had begun to be taken over by Lin Shi. After Saint came to the Wang family of Beihai, she also did her best to treat Wang Tianzong and made good progress. At the same time, because of her joining, the Wang family of Beihai's gene potions, which were already at the top level in the world, continued to make breakthroughs. Several kinds of gene potions under research had been semi-finished. At least so far, both sides were very satisfied with each other's existence and this cooperation. Yes. Wang Xiangxiao nodded and then smiled. But the main purpose of coming here today is to pick someone up. His voice was very soft, but his eyes were full of expectation. Chapter 1243. Wang Tianzong was in the largest cell of Beihai prison. It was called a cell, but in fact, it could be said to be the most technologically advanced ward. The spacious room, which was like a hall, was full of all kinds of medical equipment. Countless data was scrolling on the screen every minute and second. The top group of the Beihai Biological Laboratory watched Wang Tianzong 24 hours a day, observing his situation, injecting drugs, recording, and constantly thinking about various treatment plans. Just like last time, Wang Xiangxiao stood in front of Wang Tianzong's hibernation chamber for a moment and finally shook his head and walked out. His Majesty's recovery has been speeding up recently. The potion you used on him before was correct. His condition is very dangerous. That potion is one of the best choices at present, and it can greatly stabilize his body. Even if it's me, what I can make won't be much better than that potion, and it will take time. Saint followed Wang Xiangxiao, and her tone was still calm. But that potion seems to be incomplete. In my calculation, it should be able to play a greater role. Saint just began to formally contact a series of treatment plans for Wang Tianzong these days. She had been to Beihai prison once before. Although the two sides cooperated at the beginning, how could the Wang family of Beihai really trust her and Lin Shi, who were of unknown origin? Saint herself could detect more than a dozen tests. It was not until yesterday that the Wang family of Beihai initially let down its guard and showed her some data of Wang Tianzong's body. Then the current person in charge of the laboratory discussed with her for nearly a night. After further confirming Saint's real talent and knowledge in this aspect, and further confirming that she really had no malice, he officially allowed her to begin to integrate into the work of saving Wang Tianzong. To be exact, Saint had only been in contact with Wang Tianzong for a few hours, but she had already made several useful suggestions to the laboratory and sorted out their treatment plans immediately. You should be talking about the body of the god of war. Wang Xianxia thought for a moment. But that's half and only half. The body of the god of war? Saint's mouth twitched, and she seemed to be a little dissatisfied. Her eyes were a little cold. What's wrong? Wang Xianxia looked at her strangely. Saint took a deep breath and didn't say anything. She came from the god of war's realm, and the word god of war meant a lot to her. It wasn't just a simple belief. Now, a piece of trash genetic potion, although it was close to the top in the real environment, still made her a little uncomfortable in the name of the god of war. Why is it only half? Saint asked expressionlessly. My mother gave the other half to someone else. Wang Xianxia said quietly. He still didn't know who his mother had given that half of the body of the god of war to. Saint was silent for a moment, as if he was thinking about something. Finally he nodded. Where is Lin Shi? Wang Xianxia asked suddenly. He has arrived in West Africa and has begun to sort out the interior of the Divine Martial Army. His Highness will use the Divine Martial Army as the foundation to take over the rule of the dark world of Africa as soon as possible. Saint said faintly, it will probably take 1 or 2 years. Wang Xianxia nodded silently. If it was someone else who said it would take a year or 2 to inform the dark world of continent, Wang Xianxia wouldn't believe it. Continent was a complicated place. The Divine Martial Army was known as the #1 army of continent, but it only had a slight advantage. Now, all the superpowers in the dark world, except for Emperor Dong's palace who hadn't had time to intervene in continent, almost all the superpowers had spokesmen in continent. If Lin Shi took over Tianzong and wanted to conquer continent, there would be a lot of friction with these superpowers. This could also further strengthen the cooperative relationship between the two sides. If possible, if Beihai can lend us some masters when necessary, the time will be faster. Saint continued to speak. Lin Shi was undoubtedly a master. And the apostle beside Lin Shi was an expert among experts. If they really went all out, the apostle could be said to be the strongest among the 3 of them at present. Even Saint, who had the worst combat capability, could not be threatened by ordinary experts of the invincible realm. But now the extreme suppression of the real environment almost locked the strength of the 3 of them. If it was in the same environment a month ago, it wouldn't take them a year or 2 to conquer the Africa land. To put it simply and crudely, the apostle could completely solve any force in the Africa land in a few minutes. Even if there was a plan to cover something up, it wouldn't take more than a week. But now, among the 3 of them, Lin Shi was the least affected, and Saint was in the middle. As for the apostle with the strongest combat capability, it was a complete tragedy now. Conquering the Africa land in a year or 2 was a relatively optimistic statement. Wang Xianxia frowned, but soon he stretched his brows and chuckled. I can't leave alone. Beihai is too long. As for the others, they are also useful. Let's see how it goes. I can temporarily lend you a master, but he can only leave Zhongzhou state for a short time. He still has to come back as soon as possible. Is he the one we are going to pick up now? Saint asked. Wang Xianxia said yes. At present, the Wang family of Beihai, not counting my father, not counting my second uncle who has left Mount Dibing, and not counting my special case, he can be said to be the first master in Beihai and the only invincible realm expert in Mount Dibing. When necessary, he can go to the Africa land to help you. He is very strong. Saint was silent for a while and said softly, no, not very strong, but very strong. In today's dark world, in terms of pure strength, he is the only one who can approach His Majesty Li Tianlong in terms of strength. She had only known Wang Tianzong for a short time, but the time she spent in Beihai prison was not short. During this time, in addition to improving the existing gene potion technology in Beihai, she also studied the prisoners here, who were not prisoners of prisoners. Saint was naturally very interested in the person who was imprisoned next to Wang Tianzong and could feel the core sword intent of the chosen one at a close distance every day. She had already gotten the physical data of the other party. It was no exaggeration to say that in terms of pure strength, the other party was only second to Li Tianlan in today's dark world, and even stronger than Wang Xingxiao and Lin Shi. But it was just strength. I can introduce him to you later. In the future, Lin Shi can contact him directly. Mount Dibbing has complete trust in him. Wang Xingxiao walked through the corridor and came to another cell next to Wang Tianzong's. Compared with the medical equipment everywhere in Wang Tianzong's room, this place was decorated as luxuriously and comfortably as a 7-star hotel. Wang Xingxiao stood in front of the door and subconsciously narrowed his eyes. He had not knocked on the door, but he could clearly feel that the space at the door was filled with an indescribable aura. Fierce, violent, condensed, sharp, and fierce. It was like saber radiance, but also like sword energy. It was like a saber or a sword, but it was full of tsunami-like power. Wang Xingxiao chuckled and reached out to knock on the door. In the space behind the door, all the aura paused and then disappeared in an instant. Wang Xingxiao's voice was calm. "Brother Jiang, it's me." Chapter 1244. The wind in Emperor Dong's palace was cool and soft. It blew over the lawn, over the fountain, over the lake, and poured into the boat in the lake, bringing with it black hair wantonly. Wisps of rich fragrance seemed to completely melt in the quiet rain. Li Tianlan sat on the boat, holding a fishing rod in his hand. He looked at the rippling water in front of him and subconsciously rubbed his forehead. "What's wrong?" Qin Weibai leaned lazily on Li Tianlan and put a grape in his mouth. Her voice was a little soft. "It's boring." Li Tianlan shook his head. "I find that I don't like fishing very much. It's a little boring." "Then what do you want to do?" Qin Weibai ate the fruit and said with a smile, "I'll go with you." Li Tianlan thought about it and said seriously, "I don't know." He suddenly felt very confused. He had no direction and no motivation. He didn't want to do anything, but it was boring if he didn't do anything. In the shortest time, he reviewed his life of more than 20 years. He began to temper his body when he was young. He was exposed to martial arts when he was a teenager and desperately wanted to make himself stronger. His coming-of-age ceremony was when he was taken to the desert prison by Thunder God. He lost to Fireman when he was at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. After he rushed into the thunder-shocking realm, he lost to Fireman again. So he abolished his martial arts and began to practice again. That year in the desert prison could be said to be the turning point of his life. Under the great setback, he made his martial arts foundation absolutely perfect. The desperate maze hidden in the darkness under the prison made up for his state of mind and made his will perfect. He entered the Sky Academy at the age of 19. It should have been a slow school life. At that time, in Li Honghe's mind, maybe he wanted him to really adapt to life in Zhongzhou state after leaving the border. He wanted him to completely enter the secular world, grow up slowly, form his own team, and accumulate his own prestige among the younger generation. Li Honghe would also take advantage of this time to pave the way for him with the Dongqing clan. After graduation, he would marry Dongqing Rushi, enter the Border Control Corps, climb up from the bottom, and completely integrate into the system of Zhongzhou state. 20 years later, Li Tianlan was nearly 40 years old. With the heritage of the Li family and Li Tianlan's talent, it was enough for him to enter the peak of the invincible realm and rank at the top of the divine list. At that time, Li Tianlan could replace Dongqing Wudi as the Marshal of Zhongzhou state, enter the parliament, and control the Border Control Corps. It was only during that period that Li Tianlan, who had the full support of the giant group, was qualified to confront Gu Xingyun, Kunlun City, and even the Wang family of Beihai. With the help of the giant group to overwhelm Kunlun City, the giant group completed the reshuffle of its own group with the help of the interests it obtained. It strengthened its cohesion to the greatest extent and allowed the Dongqing clan, the Bai family, and the Zhou family to complete the consolidation and integration. After the transformation, The three wealthy families pushed him to the position of the state-protecting war god and ended the cause and effect between him and the Wang family of Beihai. If there were no accidents, this was his life trajectory, and it was also the safest life path for him in the eyes of the Li family and the Dongxing clan. However, Qin Weibai's appearance completely shattered this trajectory. Even though the Li family had been down and out for many years, it was not to the extent of being forgotten. The heir of the Li family was in the teeth of the storm, and Qin Weibai was the focus of other people's attention. From the moment the two of them met, his life had become extremely abrupt. The Samsara Palace, the final battle of East Island, and the external forces swept over. Li Tianlan was swept to East Island before he could adapt to the real life in the secular world. Then it was a journey from Huading to the polar ground for 3 years, far away from the situation of Zhongzhou State. His life in the academy was about to end before it started. The maneuver of the two academies and the chaos in Snow Country broke out at the same time. Li Tianlan really ushered in his own era. And the beginning of this era was his revisiting his old place and his 2 years in the desert prison. Until now, he was invincible in the world. But looking back along the way, Li Tianlan found that he had almost never really integrated into the prosperity of Zhongzhou State. His goal had always been clear. The pressure and motivation had always surrounded him. He was busy, thinking, struggling, and fighting. He knew what he was doing and what he should do. But now, he lost his direction. Perhaps it was because he had never truly relaxed before, so when he truly relaxed, the first thing he felt was a sense of helplessness. It was an extreme discomfort and a great sense of loss. The situation in Zhongzhou State seemed to be still chaotic and intense, but in fact, the academy and the new group had strangely calmed down. The Ministry of Supervision of Zhongzhou State officially intervened in the Liaodong wandering meditation case. But after the Ministry of Supervision arrived in Liaodong, Bai Qingqian made some similar stable and harmonious voices in several official speeches. After all, Bai Qingqian was the speaker of Liaodong. The Ministry of Supervision had to pay attention to her opinions. Therefore, Liaodong was now in a strange stalemate. As for the Flourishing Age Fund, the joint investigation of various departments also came to a standstill. The Wang family of Beihai stepped forward to take over some of the mess left by the Flourishing Age Fund after the joint investigation. After sorting it out, it would naturally become a small gold mine. They were still waiting to continue to eat more profits from the Flourishing Age Fund. But as the investigation came to a standstill, their expectations seemed to be far away. The major groups were still holding back and keeping a wait-and-see attitude. Jiang Shangyu and Gu Xingyun were completely silent. Li Huaqing didn't meet Li Tianlan, and he seemed to have put down his attention on Li Guangtu. In short, the whole Zhongzhou State strangely calmed down under the seemingly intense situation. And these things, with the rise of his status, no longer needed him to worry about them personally. The existence of military counselor did play a great role. It could be said that he was Li Tianlan's real right-hand man. After Li Tianlan set the strategic goal, the rest was operated by military counselor. There was no need for Li Tianlan to worry at all. In the first situation, Li Tianlan was very clear about what he had to do. What he needed was patience. Waiting. No matter what he wanted to do, all of this had to be after the election. And there was still more than half a year before the election. During this period of time when he could only wait and do nothing, it was the time for Li Tianlan to relax and enjoy life leisurely. But he didn't know how to enjoy life at all, nor could he adapt to the leisure of doing nothing at the moment. He really didn't know what to do. Li Tianlan casually put down the fishing rod in his hand and sighed. It's boring. I can't get interested in anything. It's a little boring. With his strength at this level, the progress of martial arts had been extremely slow. Meditation didn't work at all. Now he was completely pursuing the most comfortable state of martial arts. When he was completely relaxed, with himself as the center, everything within tens of thousands of meters was under his absolute control. Not only every grass and tree, but even every wisp of airflow, he knew it like the palm of his hand. His sword energy casually enveloped the entire Emperor Dong's palace and adjusted the temperature in the Emperor Dong's palace according to his will. Within the scope of his sword energy, he could turn midsummer into cold winter into early spring, cool breeze in the stuffy Emperor Dong's palace, and he could also make drizzle in the Emperor Dong's palace under the scorching sun. To put it bluntly, this sounded incredible, but in fact, it was the sublimation of the four realms of martial arts. It was a further and deeper application of the four realms of martial arts. Now he was fishing here, but in fact he knew every fish in the artificial lake like the palm of his hand. He even knew how many bubbles they spat. As long as he wanted, he could catch all the fish in the artificial lake with his eyes closed. What was the point of sitting here? Qin Weibai glanced at him and said bitterly, "You think I'm annoying, don't you? You think it's boring to stay with me?" Li Tunlan shook his head subconsciously. "I just think fishing is boring. Why don't we go back? Go back for what? Do you want to bully me again?" Qin Weibai tilted her head and looked at him. Her eyes became more and more aggrieved. "It's boring to be with me. That's not what you said when you played with me last night. Do you only find it interesting in bed? When you're tired of playing with me, are you going to kick me out? What nonsense are you talking about?" Li Tianlan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He subconsciously reached out and pinched Qin Weibai's pink earlobe. "I just feel that I'm not used to it now. It's a waste of time. Maybe it's because I haven't really experienced these things before. I don't really understand the so-called freedom when I'm so idle. You basically ignored me these days when we were together. Except for working hard in bed, you didn't coax me." Qin Weibai shook her head and let Li Tianlan pinch her earlobe and complain. "Yeah, I'm in a daze all day. If I stay like this, I feel like a fool." Li Tianlan sighed softly and suddenly said, "What on earth did Li Huaqing say to you that day?" On the day Qin Weibai came back, she talked with Li Huaqing for nearly 3 hours. No one knew what they talked about. Even Han Xinyan, who went with Qin Weibai, couldn't hear the content of their conversation because Ma Si asked her to drink tea. But Li Tianlan could clearly feel that since that conversation, the battle between the Academy and the Flourishing Age Fund seemed to have eased. Although it still seemed to be at loggerheads, in fact, both sides had maintained a restrained attitude. "I just tested his trump card." Qin Weibai leaned against Li Tianlan lazily and said softly, "If I'm not wrong, he should take the initiative to talk to you in the near future. After the talk, the relationship between us will become clear, and the next election should be smoother." Li Tianlan moved his hand around the slender waist in his arms. He said in a hoarse voice, "I asked, what on earth did you talk to him about?" Qin Weibai's body trembled slightly. She blushed and twisted her body. She whispered, "He's still outside. How dare you resist?" Li Tianlan moved again and said with a smile, "There's no one around. What are you afraid of? If you don't tell the truth, believe it or not, I will punish you on this ship. Tell me, what on earth did you talk about?" "I won't say." Qin Weibai pressed her lips tightly and hummed weakly, "I do know Li Huaqing's trump card. But so far, he hasn't made up his mind. There are still variables. It's not a good time to say it now. It's better to wait for a while and let him talk to you himself. It's too boring to wait." Li Tunlan chuckled and unscrupulously felt the touch of softness on his fingertips. Qin Weibai lowered her head and gently bit Li Tianlan's arm. She said with a cry, "I didn't bring other clothes." Li Tianlan was indifferent. "How about this? I still have a card in my hand. This card can make Li Huaqing make up his mind quickly. In a few days at most, I promise he will take the initiative to come to you, okay?" Li Tianlan smiled with satisfaction, took out a piece of paper and wiped his fingers. The delicate fragrance on the ship seemed to be stronger. Li Tianlan held the woman next to him in his arms again. "Open your mouth." Qin Weibai twisted her body, wanting to resist but also welcome. "Orange," Li Tianlan said. Qin Weibai, who felt weak all over and blushed, reached out her trembling hand to pick up an orange and peeled it clumsily. Her eyes were blurred and in a trance, and her body trembled slightly unconsciously. A piece of orange with its tangerine veins was sent into his mouth. Li Tianlan ate the orange and gently bit Qin Weibai's soft fingers. He said vaguely, "How to deal with Li Kuangtu? Do you have any suggestions?" The numbness on her fingers made Qin Weibai tremble again. Leaning against him, she was like a devil and couldn't resist at all. It was like the forest on the night when she came from Tianan to Emperor Dong's palace. It was like Li Tianlan's dishonest claws just now. It seemed that she didn't know when she had been so obedient to him, let him bully her, and was completely controlled. Qin Weibai, who was scolding herself in her heart, bit her red lips, forced herself to cheer up and murmured, "I don't know. You decide." She took her fingers back, picked off the tangerine veins on the orange, shook her head hard and whispered, "When Li Huaqing came to you, you knew what to do. It is true that he has cards up his sleeve, but my suggestion is, you can't believe everything he says, but you can't ignore it." Li Tianlan nodded thoughtfully. Qin Weibai leaned closer to Li Tianlan and said in a soft voice, "It's so boring." Li Tianlan opened his mouth and was about to say something, but he suddenly smelled a hint. He chuckled and grabbed the fishing rod again. "I think it's okay. Fishing and cultivating one's mind are good." Qin Weibai gently gritted her teeth and looked at Li Tianlan. She became more and more resentful, and her body leaned closer to him. Li Tianlan was unmoved. "Bad guy, are you fishing or keeping me in suspense?" Qin Weibai gently pinched him. Her light voice seemed to be coquettish and pleading, very implicit and very seductive. "Go back. Beg me." Li Tianlan chuckled. "You're going to humiliate me again, aren't you? You're always like this. You were like this the first time. You even hit me and scolded me. You're a bad guy? You agreed yourself." Li Tianlan smiled and said, "And I didn't scold you. You admitted it yourself. I was trying to please you." Qin Weibai said bitterly, "I'm not coquettish at all. And the first time, I didn't agree and I didn't." She suddenly frowned, her eyes were in a trance, and her face became a little pale. Li Tianlan was also stunned. He looked at Qin Weibai and gradually frowned. Qin Weibai, who would bravely look into his eyes in the past, avoided his gaze and turned to look into the distance. Her eyes were a little unfocused. Some small fun between husband and wife suddenly became silent. An incomparably deep light flashed in Li Tianlan's eyes. Qin Weibai's face became paler and paler, without any blood. Silence continued on the boat. The surrounding rain seemed to be a little messy. "Tianlan." After nearly 10 minutes, Qin Weibai said softly, "I want to go back." Li Tianlan held the fishing rod and did not speak for a long time. Chapter 1245. There were very few so-called small clinics in Emperor Dong's palace, which was like a large construction site. At present, except for a large general hospital in the city center, there were some regular private hospitals similar to sanatoriums, which belonged to Emperor Dong's palace. Ning Qianxing had implemented the free medical care plan in Xinyuan City more than a year ago. As long as the official residents of Xinyuan City were treated in the regular hospitals in Xinyuan City, no matter if they had a fever, a cold, or a serious illness. In this way, the so-called private clinics had almost disappeared. Because of this, when Tianlan Clinic, a small clinic with a coquettish and even bold name, officially opened inside Emperor Dong's palace, it almost caused a sensation in the whole palace. Many people even thought that Emperor Dong had been bored recently, so he opened a clinic in his home and became a doctor. No one thought that this small clinic was a provocation. If the clinic was opened outside Emperor Dong's palace and was named after Emperor Dong, the sign of the clinic would probably be smashed as soon as it was put up. However, when such a small clinic appeared inside Emperor Dong's palace with the sign of Emperor Dong's palace, everyone knew that it must be done by their own people, or at least with the acquiescence of Emperor Dong, or even by Emperor Dong himself out of boredom. Tianlan Clinic was not small. The main building was a detached villa with 4 floors above and below the ground, located in the garden area of the central area of Emperor Dong's palace. The scenery was elegant. The basement floor stored medicinal materials and medical equipment. The first floor was the outpatient hall and pharmacy. Infusions and injections could be done here. The second floor was the ward. A dozen or so wards were arranged in a standard way, and the largest bedroom was even hung with the sign of Donghuang's special VIP room. The third floor was the laboratory, bedroom, and study of the clinic owner. The clinic had been open for less than a week, but there was an endless stream of patients every day. Many people were not sick, but they came to pretend to be sick with the idea of getting close to Emperor Donghuang. Then they were disappointed to find that the boss of the clinic was not Emperor Donghuang, nor was he a senior of Emperor Donghuang's palace who had a close relationship with Emperor Donghuang as they had expected. Instead, it was a young fat man who looked unfamiliar, who smiled every day and looked easy to talk to. As a result, the clinic's business quickly became cold. Xianyuan Wuxiang didn't take it seriously and just stayed in the clinic. Strictly speaking, he just stayed in the clinic. In the less than a week since the clinic opened, he didn't go out at all. When there were patients, he would prescribe some medicine. When there were no patients, he would just stay in the clinic, play games, watch movies, sleep, and daydream. He ordered 3 meals a day from the F&B department using the internal app of Emperor Dong's palace. In the past 5 or 6 days, he didn't eat much, but he had consumed nearly 10 boxes of cola and gained 2 or 3 kilograms. He was developing from a little fatty to a big fatty. The connection with Li Tianlan was suddenly cut off. His connection with Xing Tian was suddenly cut off. Xianyuan Wuxiang immersed himself in the small clinic that he was very satisfied with. He played games and crazily spent money, watched movies, and crazily complained. It was a happy and boring life. He was using this method to fade away from Emperor Dong's palace and Li Tianlan as quickly as possible, patiently waiting for the right time. However, after a few days of this carefree life, Xianyuan Wuxiang felt that something was wrong. To be exact, it started last night. The clinic was already closed at that time, and Xianyuan Wuxiang was sitting in front of the computer excitedly, instructing the virtual character in the virtual online game, who was dressed in godly equipment, to go to the instance dungeon. A faint uneasiness emerged from the depths of his heart without warning. This uneasiness began to grow stronger and stronger. He was restless and didn't sleep well all night. Xianyuan Wuxiang knew something was wrong. Or something was going to happen. He had the most critical authority. Even if the real environment had almost completely blocked the earth at this time and suppressed his role, intuition was always there. The sudden uneasiness must mean that something was going to happen, or it had already happened. Xianyuan Wuxiang didn't sleep well all night. He frowned and analyzed, but he still couldn't figure out what was wrong. Now, the most worthy of his attention was undoubtedly Li Tianlan. But Xianyuan Wuxiang was very sure that there was nothing wrong with Li Tianlan. Now he had officially embarked on the journey back, and everything was going well. He was waiting for the next opportunity to guide him. Next, what was worth his attention was outside the Earth. The space-time corridor, the war god realm, the Emperor Palace. But he just paid attention to it. The destruction of the neutral camp was close at hand and couldn't be stopped. The Princess Royal of the space-time corridor came here first, which was enough to prove this. But whether it was his father, the war god, or the human emperor who hadn't officially taken action, they would all die, but they would never die so quickly. The war between the stars was not even a warm-up so far. According to the ordinary people's concept of time, it would take at least hundreds of years for it to completely end. And Qin Weibai was now in Emperor Dong's palace, which meant that the sister-in-law of the Lin clan headquarters wouldn't have too much problem. He had left a test bench in the sister-in-law's consciousness. If she really had a problem, the test bench would give him a clear warning. If there was no problem, what else could there be? Jiang Shangyu? The news of Unknown's death could be confirmed. The war god personally took action and also used a divine form that Li Tianlan hadn't activated. In any case, Unknown couldn't have survived. Jiang Shangyu did have a great advantage, but he couldn't be a threat at all in the near future. The real environment was the same for them. Xianyuan Wuxiang was currently in a state of being blocked, which meant that Jiang Shangyu couldn't threaten Emperor Dong's palace. Wang Tianzong? If something unexpected happened to Wang Tianzong, the saint who was currently responsible for treating Wang Tianzong would definitely tell Lin Shi as soon as possible, and Lin Shi would also pass the news to him and Xing Tian as soon as possible. So Wang Tianzong was not a problem. No matter how Xianyuan Wuxiang thought about it, he couldn't figure out where the problem was. He thought about it all night. After breakfast, he didn't bother to go to the bedroom on the third floor, so he directly fell asleep in front of the computer. It was lunchtime when he was woken up by the phone. The clinic was quiet and cold, and no one visited it in the morning. Xianyuan Wuxiang rubbed his eyes and answered the phone. He yawned and said hello. On the other end of the phone, Xing Tian's thunderous voice sounded, low and confused. Your Highness, I don't feel good. Xianyuan Wuxiang's heart sank for no reason, and his sleepiness disappeared instantly. If his uneasiness yesterday was just an accident, it was obviously a little unusual that Xing Tian, who also had the authority, also had a premonition. What's going on? Xianyuan Wuxiang said in a low voice. I don't know. Xing Tian's voice was hoarse. There's nothing unreasonable in my logic. I don't know what's wrong. Xianyuan Wuxiang's eyes kept flickering. Both of them had a premonition, but they didn't know what was going on. In this case, it probably meant that the thing that made them uneasy hadn't happened yet. But what on earth was it? Come to me. Xianyuan Wuxiang thought for a moment and said slowly. Xing Tian said yes and hung up the phone. Xianyuan Wuxiang went into the bathroom and washed his face with cold water. Then he picked up the phone and dialed a number. After a long wait, the phone was connected. Lin Shi's voice sounded from the other end of the phone. What's up? Where are you? Xianyuan Wuxiang frowned. In addition to Lin Shi's voice, there was continuous noise on the phone. The apostle is messing with his bass. I came to have a look. What's the matter? When did you become interested in his things? Xianyuan Wuxiang asked. Lin Shi chuckled and didn't say anything. Xianyuan Wuxiang thought for a moment and said directly, I always feel that something is going to happen. Have you encountered any problems recently? Although Lin Shi and Li Tianlan were destined to stand on opposite sides in this case, no matter what. Whether it was Xianyuan Wuxiang or Lin Shi, the most important purpose of their coming here was to ensure Li Tianlan's smooth return. In this matter, there was naturally nothing that the two sides couldn't communicate. His authority was different from Lin Shi's, so there were naturally differences. At least, Lin Shi didn't have this kind of premonition that didn't involve himself. Lin Shi was silent for a moment and seemed a little confused. What do you think? Xianyuan Wuxiang paused and said calmly, Xing Tian reminded me. Xing Tian doesn't have enough authority. Under the suppression of the real environment, isn't it normal for his premonition to be chaotic? Lin Shi said lightly. His premonition can't be wrong. Xianyuan Wuxiang said in a low voice. Just because Xing Tian is actually not a human? Lin Shi laughed. He should be your pen, right? Or your logical model. In other words, you are Xing Tian, right? Xianyuan Wuxiang's eyes suddenly narrowed. He held the phone and was silent for half a minute. Then he said lightly, How did you find out? I found out when I fought with King Wei in the Starry Sky. In fact, that place still can't get rid of the suppression of the real environment. Whether it is King Wei, you, me, or Saint, our real combat strength is less than 1/3 of our peak state. But Xing Tian's authority is 2 levels lower than ours, but the effect he exerts is somewhat incredible. This is obviously not normal. Lin Shi said lightly, and the name Xing Tian itself is a bit strange. He is the ancient war god of the human clan. If he has nothing to do with that person, under the attention of the will of the world, who would dare to give him this name? Also, when we were chatting, we once talked about returning. We have only been fighting in the divinity realm for a short time, and our foundation is weak. But the space-time corridor is different. Only then did I realize that you, the 9th prince, look like a harmless saint, but in fact, I am far from your match. Who knows how many times you have returned? The title of saint is just your authority that is exposed to the outside world. If Xing Tian is really Xing Tian, then it is impossible that he has not reached the 7th level of authority by now. But if you are the return of the ancient war god, all this can be explained. Xianyuan Wuxiang's expression was somewhat indifferent. So, Your Highness, the 9th prince, in fact, there are no 2 guides at all. From the beginning to the end, the space-time corridor has only prepared 1 guide for His Majesty, and that is yourself. Xing Tian is the core of your observer authority, right? Only in this way can you be sure that your feeling is not wrong. TSK, you should have returned more than once, right? I am very curious about your third authority. Is it martial arts? There is no point in saying this. Xianyuan Wuxiang said blandly, the most important thing is that now I can be sure that there is something wrong at present, but I do not know what the problem is. Lin Shi also fell silent. After a while, he slowly said, the only thing I can be sure of is that the problem is not with me. I can be sure of this. Xianyuan Wuxiang was thoughtful. He did not doubt Lin Shi's words. Although people who climbed on the path of martial arts did not have an almost omnidirectional premonition like him, they were extremely sensitive to their own instincts. It was a basic quality to seek good fortune and avoid bad luck. In the current environment, if Lin Shi's instincts did not remind him of anything, then there would be no problem on his side. But what on earth was the problem? Something happened after we came here, or even before we came here, something might have happened. Jiang Shangyu's existence made any possibility possible. Is it possible that the location of Miracle City was exposed a long time ago, so? Lin Shi slowly analyzed. You mean the Order Camp's expedition? Xianyuan Wuxiang shook his head subconsciously. Impossible. Their top experts can't act at will. Even if there is an expedition, it is only at the peak of the apostle level. The heaven-deceiving king guards the rotating galaxy. If the expedition really started, the warning would have come long ago. A peak expert who deceives authority, even if he is not as good as the eldest princess, is enough to do too many things. Lin Shi was silent. In fact, in the face of the enemy, the heaven-deceiving king did have too many ways, including deceiving distance, deceiving perception, and even deceiving the enemy's thoughts. If he just wanted to guard the Miracle City, he could play tricks. At the very least, he had time to send a warning. If the so-called long-range expert had not yet approached the rotating galaxy, it would not have caused Xianyuan Wuxiang to feel uneasy. So the problem was still not this. Then what the hell is it? Xianyuan Wuxiang felt a headache and a little scared. There was obviously a problem, but he could not find it. This undoubtedly meant that when the problem happened, there might be unexpected trouble. I'm hanging up. Xianyuan Wuxiang hammered his forehead, said simply, and hung up the phone. He walked to the window and looked into the distance through the flowers in front of the villa. In the distance, a pleasure boat was floating on the artificial lake in Emperor Dong's palace. It was drizzling outside, and the sword energy was floating in every corner of Emperor Dong's palace. On the pleasure boat, Xianyuan Wuxiang could see Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai there, loving each other, but he could not see what they were doing. Xianyuan Wuxiang looked at the lake dully, as if his mind had gone to another world. The door of the clinic was pushed open from the outside. Xianyuan Wuxiang turned his head slightly. It was not Xing Tian, but a beautiful woman about 27 or 28 years old. The woman's face was slightly pale, and there was a hint of weakness in her voice. Doctor, I'll prescribe some medicine for you, okay? Xianyuan Wuxiang smiled. The woman looked confused. But I haven't told you where I feel uncomfortable. No matter where you feel uncomfortable, you have to take medicine. There is no other way. Xianyuan Wuxiang shook his head. But doctor, let me say it first. I'll prescribe you medicine first. You can talk as long as you want when you leave here, okay? Xianyuan Wuxiang looked down and rummaged through the medicine box. The woman's face grew paler, and her voice seemed to tremble. She said hoarsely, "Are you crazy?" She turned and walked to the door, cursing the quack in her heart. A small bottle was thrown from behind her. The woman turned around subconsciously, and with a little coldness in her hand, she grabbed the bottle. She was a civil servant in Emperor Dong's palace, and she was in charge of intelligence gathering and sorting out on the 3rd floor of the castle. She looked slim and delicate, but she was also a graduate of the Sky Academy. There were many women like her in Emperor Dong's palace, who looked delicate but were actually very fierce. In a few months, there would only be more women like her. 3 times a day, 1 pill each time. Take it with warm water. Just take it later. Xianyuan Wuxiang smiled gently. Of course, if you don't believe me, just throw it away when you go out. The pale woman looked at Xianyuan Wushang with a complicated expression. She hesitated for a moment, and then slowly walked out with the bottle. Xianyuan Wushang walked back to the window, thinking carefully. The door of the clinic was pushed open again. Xing Tian walked in with heavy footsteps. He closed the door, pressed the button to close the clinic, and came to Xianyuan Wushang's side. He said in a low voice, "Your Highness. Did you find anything wrong?" Xianyuan Wushang turned around and glanced at him. "There's nothing wrong in all aspects. It shouldn't have happened yet. It's normal that it hasn't happened, but there should be a direction," Xianyuan Wushang said in a low voice. He hooked his finger slightly, and a cube shining with a dark blue light flew out of Xing Tian's chest. It was a very small cube, or to be exact, a Rubik's Cube. The Rubik's Cube shone with a dark blue light, and every ray of light seemed to be condensed with countless words and lines. This was Xianyuan Wushang's logic model. It was also the core of his authority system. Xianyuan Wushang took the Rubik's Cube and played with it. Then he took out an identical blue Rubik's Cube from his chest. The two Rubik's Cubes attracted each other and instantly merged into one. The two Rubik's Cubes instantly expanded several times. It no longer looked like a Rubik's Cube, but a cube with countless intricate structures inside. The inside of the cube was filled with many tiny structures, and glowing gears spun slightly. Moving, a large number of seemingly meaningless words were constantly surging inside. And these words, which ordinary people couldn't see or understand, became stories in Xianyuan Wushang's eyes. All of the stories were closely connected, and there were no logical loopholes. "So, what's going on?" he muttered to himself. Under normal circumstances, since he had a premonition, even if there weren't any loopholes in his logic model, there would at least be signs. As the ninth prince of the space-time corridor, there was almost nothing he couldn't pay attention to, and there were no secrets he couldn't understand. The neutral camp was different from the other two camps, and he and Lin Shi were also different. Lin Shi's foundation was too shallow. Even if he was talented, he still needed to accumulate experience. In fact, Lin Shi was right. If he really fought without any scruples, Xianyuan Wushang could fight a group of Lin Shi with all his strength. This was the real combat strength formed by the control of authority after returning several times. This time, Lin Shi was the ninth prince of the corridor of time and space. It was also because he became Li Tianlan's guide that he was able to enter the core of the corridor of time and space. But in fact, before he died last time, he was already one of the core figures of the corridor of time and space. At this stage, the corridor of time and space had no secrets for him. Others might have secrets, but he knew everything related to the stability of the human clan. Since he knew something, it would exist in the logic model he formed. So as long as he had a premonition, his logic model would show signs. In other words, if something happened that didn't appear in his logic model, it proved that it wasn't something he paid attention to, and naturally wouldn't arouse his premonition. But now he had a premonition, but his logic model didn't move. What did this mean? The suppression of the real environment? This was too exaggerated. Did anything happen to you recently? Xianyuan Wushang asked. Xing Tian shook his head silently and looked at the cube in Xianyuan Wushang's hand. No. He was now the leader of a patrol team in Emperor Dong's palace, in charge of 4 team members. He patrolled for 8 hours a day and didn't do any specific work. He just wandered around Emperor Dong's palace. Now Li Tianlan was in Emperor Dong's palace, and every corner of the palace was covered by his sword energy. What problem could there be? Even if there was a problem, Li Tianlan could solve it with a casual move. So now Xing Tian really had nothing to do. He talked with several team members symbolically, and after work, except for 8 hours of patrolling, he basically slept for 15 hours. He encountered everything. That's really strange. Xianyuan Wushang muttered to himself and pulled out a jet-black writing brush from Xing Tian's chest. The brush changed in his hand and became a pencil. Xianyuan Wushang thought for a while and pointed at the logic model in front of him with the pencil. The blue light on the logic model shone slightly, and inside it, a tiny gear that was hard to see with a microscope turned gently. A small part of the gear turned into an extremely thick book. Xinyuan Wushang opened it silently. The book was full of words. To be exact, it was a story. It was a story that didn't have much content, but it had all sorts of details. Xinyuan Wushang read it quietly. The story was purely handwritten, and the pencils were extremely clear. The story was about a young man named Li Tianlan who left a camp on the border with an admission notice. He carried countless secrets and the hope of a declining family on his back. Under the secret attention of many people, he came to a city called Huading, where he met a woman named Qin Weibai, and a series of events happened. From a bystander's point of view, this story was not up to standard, because it was too messy and inexplicable, and there was no such thing as a protagonist or a supporting role. Every word, every picture, every word, every action, every person who appeared in the story, every sentence, every action, why he said this, why he did this, all of it had a lot of descriptions similar to narration. All the inner activities of Li Tianlan in the story. All the behind-the-scenes planning of Qin Weibai in the story. All of them were clearly outlined in the most detailed description, so it was so verbose that it gave people a splitting headache. Moreover, the timeline in the story was extremely messy. It would often jump from 1 second to several decades ago. It would even constantly affect one's worldview and jump to another time and space. Many times, some of the dialogues in the book could not even be determined if they were spoken or imagined. Xinyuan Wushang read the story quietly, watching the Sky Academy, watching the final battle of East Island, and watching the chaos in Snow Country. The handwriting in the story began to blur from clear, from neat to messy. Xinyuan Wushang frowned. During the chaos in Snow Country, the story already had problems that couldn't be adjusted. Large patches of alterations kept appearing, countless clearly written content disappeared inexplicably, and the rest of the story began to be intermittent. The irresistible pressure of the world's will and the real environment directly pressed down when the story had problems. The whole story began to become fragmented, so the structure became more and more messy, and the overall structure of the story was on the verge of collapse under the absolute pressure of the real environment. It seemed that some content that had been written or not written would be completely erased by the real environment at any time. So the whole story began to change, and the content that should not have appeared replaced a large amount of content that would disappear after the whole story was written. The whole story began to become more messy, and a large amount of unreasonable content made the whole story stumble. Between the lines, one could see the indignation and impetuosity that could not be vented, and the helplessness of being caught off guard and unprepared in the face of the suppression of the real environment. The story continued to develop and deviate after the chaos in Snow Country. Xinyuan Wushang continued to read faster and faster. He watched the people in the story sweep across Beihai, watched the people in the story leave the desert prison, watched the situation in the story begin to stalemate in Zhongzhou State, and watched the people in the story return to their Emperor Dong's palace. He saw the Emperor Dong's palace in the story was raining, and the sword energy was flying. The man and woman who supported the story were boating on the lake, snuggling up to each other. The perspective of the story zoomed out, and in front of a window in a detached villa, a fat man in the story was also reading the story in his hand. An indescribable chill suddenly rushed out of Xinyuan Wushang's heart, freezing his brain and heart. He held the pen, and it seemed that he wanted to continue writing the story, but the problem in his heart was completely exposed at this moment. In his sight, on the lake in the distance, a gently drifting boat began to approach the shore. Li Tianlan stood at the bow of the boat. Qin Weibai stood behind him, as if she wanted to approach, but she was hesitating and her face was pale. The picture began to become clear. The premonition that had been making him uneasy screamed wildly to remind him. Finally, the ominous feeling was shattered. Xinyuan Wushang's heart trembled, and he subconsciously lowered his head. He did not know when, but the pencil in his hand had begun to sketch in the book, and a new chapter of the story had been formed. The content of the story was completely reflected in his eyes. It could be erased, but it could not be changed. The corner of Xinyuan Wushang's mouth moved. A mouthful of blood spurted out of his mouth. "Your Highness!" Xing Tian held Xinyuan Wushang's body. All the premonitions of crisis in his mind had disappeared. Because the fact had happened, and it had become a reality. Xianyuan Wuxiang breathed rapidly, and he murmured, "Oh no, it's over." Xing Tian glanced at the book that had been pulled out of the logic model. The book, stained with Xianyuan Wuxiang's blood, glowed with an incomparably hazy light. The moment Xianyuan Wuxiang put down the pencil, the square logic model began to shrink, and the book automatically closed and was sucked in. With just a glance, Xing Tian had already seen the story that Xianyuan Wuxiang had just unconsciously continued to weave under the arrangement of the world's will. It was just a new chapter. The chapter name, Memory Disorder. Xing Tian's pupils instantly contracted. Chapter 1246. Confused, and in a trance. It was hard to describe Qin Weibai's current feelings. It was as if the closest connection with the person she cared about the most had been completely cut off. Memories flooded his mind like a tidal wave. She quietly looked at Li Tianlan standing in front of her, and there was a suffocating feeling in her heart. The distance between her and Li Tianlan was not far. She could even clearly feel Li Tianlan's constantly changing emotions, as well as a touch of alienation and doubt. Vaguely, Qin Weibai understood that she might have done something wrong. To be exact, she should have said something wrong. The specific changes should be from the beginning of their first time. That was the deepest and clearest memory of the two of them. But now thinking about it, there was an indescribable sense of confusion. Qin Weibai tried hard to think, but the more she thought, the more confused her heart became. It was as if countless images were mixed together in a disorderly manner. It was a mess, but it was natural. It was like countless Li Tianlan, countless Qin Weibai, and countless firsts were completely integrated into one place. Qin Weibai could feel Li Tianlan's astonishment and disbelief at that moment when she talked about this topic. The feeling was very faint, but it was extremely deep. This astonishment soon turned into doubt, uncertainty, and doubt. All kinds of emotions surged, making the two of them suddenly extremely awkward and stiff. A long-lost panic spread in Qin Weibai's heart. Qin Weibai had no idea what she should do now. Her clear and calm mind at any time was completely stiff. Act cute and pitiful? Several methods that were very effective for Li Tianlan in the past flashed in her mind. She wanted to do it, but she couldn't do it at all. Because of embarrassment. There was such an emotion as embarrassment between husband and wife. Qin Weibai never thought that this emotion would appear between her and Li Tianlan. What hadn't they done? Both of them had a deep understanding of each other, and they even felt as if they had become one. Occasionally, there might be shame, anger, resentment, or helplessness, but no matter what kind of emotion they felt, there was one thing that was certain. He and she both thought that they were the closest people in the world. Awkward. How could it be possible? But such an emotion appeared. It appeared when Li Tianlan had some doubts and confusion. It was not until this moment that Qin Weibai realized that she was not as calm as she had always thought. Countless memory fragments tumbled in his mind. What she had just said by accident must have deviated from what he remembered. That was why he was confused. And Qin Weibai. She had been emphasizing that she and the master of Samsara Palace were the same person. There was nothing different about them. They had the same looks, the same temperament, the same thoughts, the same memories, the same hobbies. To a certain extent, they were really the same person. The saints, the knights, and the others all accepted this. But was it really the same? If it was true, why didn't Flaming Fire and Military Counselor accept it? She inherited the feelings of the master of Samsara Palace for Li Tianlan. But in the end, he did not completely inherit that calmness. Because their pride was the same. Qin Weibai lowered her head gently. In his line of sight was the crystal-clear fruit platter. Qin Weibai picked up a grape and peeled it. She carefully tugged at the corner of Li Tianlan's clothes. "Do you want some grapes?" "No need." Li Tianlan's body shook slightly. He shook his head and turned to look at Qin Weibai. His eyes were a little dazed. Qin Weibai's whole spirit was completely tense. Li Tianlan sat down and pointed to the seat opposite him. The sword energy pushed the boat to the shore. The atmosphere became more and more awkward. Qin Weibai bit her lip and walked over stubbornly. Li Tianlan's body seemed to want to move subconsciously. I want to sit next to you, Qin Weibai said softly. She had always sat next to him, eating, drinking tea, and watching TV, instead of sitting face to face and being serious. Li Tianlan hesitated. Qin Weibai had directly sat down next to him, her arms tightly wrapped around his. What's wrong with you? She asked softly. Her voice was calm, but her heart was unprecedentedly uneasy. Li Tianlan looked at her quietly, and his eyes became more and more confused. Qin Weibai forced a smile. Li Tianlan shook his head. I don't know. This was the truest truth and his truest state of mind. Some things had been slowly accumulating and would eventually break out when he was unprepared. Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai's first time. This was the most precious picture in his heart. It was an unforgettable night, and it was integrated into the depths of his soul. What was Li Tianlan at that time? A poor boy with a little potential who had not seen much of the world and had just walked out of the border camp with too many things on his back. That was all. The identity of the heir of the Li family? Glory? Glory Mayas. The karma carried by this identity could be said that Li Tianlan might walk into a desperate situation at every step, and there were invisible dangers everywhere around him. At that time, Li Tianlan was only in the ice-condensing realm after repracticing martial arts. He had the strength to rival the thunder-shocking realm, but compared with his identity, this strength was equivalent to no means to resist risks. No one knew that Li Tianlan was under great pressure, uneasiness, and even fear at that time. What genius, what young heavenly sun, what rising star, what future invincible realm, what did the future invincible realm mean? In Li Tianlan's eyes, the so-called future invincible realm meant that he was nothing now. At that time, he was just a young man who desperately needed time to grow up, but he had to struggle in the face of strong enemies all the time. He dared not think of anything and had to be careful in everything he did. What was Qin Weibai at that time? On the surface, she was a strong woman who controlled the pre-Qin international group. She was the outstanding beauty, known as the first beauty in Zhongzhou state. She was the goddess that countless big shots in the dark world dreamed of but did not dare to get close to. She was the highest will that could dominate the Samsara palace. She was the top figure who could talk about cooperation with Zhongzhou state. She was the snow in the sky and the moon in the clouds in his heart, hazy, peerless, and inviolable. Li Tianlan still remembered the shock and amazement that seemed to invade his soul when he first saw Qin Weibai. That feeling was indescribable. Her perfection and delicacy came to his face like a dream, and he even dared not have any extra thoughts. He still remembered that when he took a sip of the water that Qin Weibai had drunk, his heartbeat accelerated and his face flushed. He still remembered the excitement and attachment when she leaned against him to take that photo in the dormitory of the Sky Academy. Whether Li Tianlan was willing to admit it or not, in fact, when he first saw Qin Weibai, he was a real conqueror. Qin Weibai had always occupied the role of the leader. Even in the future, the dominance of the two of them would quietly change with Li Tianlan taking the lead. It was also Qin Weibai who quietly changed the relationship between the two of them. Because of this, how could Li Tianlan's first time with Qin Weibai in that state of mind be like what Qin Weibai had just said? At that time, when Li Tianlan faced Qin Weibai, it was like facing the unique treasure in the world. He carefully protected her with love and affection from the bottom of his heart. This kind of love and affection had not changed until now. Maybe it was a little pretentious to say it, but Li Tianlan could be sure that his feelings for Qin Weibai could really be described with the word love. But this kind of love, this kind of feeling, this kind of love, when facing Qin Weibai now, there was a kind of alienation that Li Tianlan himself could not describe. This kind of feeling was too faint, so faint that Li Tianlan almost did not have the slightest awareness, but it always existed. Until Qin Weibai just talked about their first time. Her content and Li Tianlan's memory caused an irreconcilable conflict. At that moment, Li Tianlan actually felt that Qin Weibai was extremely strange, and the alienation that he had not noticed in the past suddenly began to become obvious. When did this feeling start? Looking back carefully, It seemed to be after the chaos in Snow Country. But Li Tianlan himself could not be sure about this. He could not tell where this feeling came from, but from time to time, he felt that Qin Weibai seemed to be slightly different from before. This difference seemed to be real, but also like his illusion. This sense of alienation accumulated little by little, giving him the most intuitive feeling that his feelings for Qin Weibai should not appear in the woman who was with him now. Finally, today, this feeling directly reached the peak and became extremely obvious. When we first did it, I did not hit you, nor did I say that you were coquettish. Li Tianlan looked into Qin Weibai's eyes with a touch of temptation. Did you forget that night? I remembered it wrong. Qin Weibai had already returned to normal in the shortest time possible, holding Li Tianlan's arm more tightly. Because of this, so you are angry? Not angry. Li Tianlan shook his head. I can't tell that kind of feeling. You said before that I respected you a little too much. Do you still remember? Qin Weibai giggled, and her bright eyes regained their liveliness. I didn't say that. I said at that time that I didn't like the way you were careful in front of me. I am your woman, and I belong to you. I need you to discipline me well, so I will be obedient. If you respect me too much, it will only drive us farther and farther away. I hope you can discipline me into the most perfect woman in your heart, not a goddess, or I won't feel owned at all. A faint body fragrance floated around Li Tianlan, and Qin Weibai's voice was enchanting and charming. You are a bad person. That night, you put something dirty on my face, and you asked me to call you daddy. You also asked me to wear that kind of thing. I didn't wear it, so you hit me. Li Tianlan's body was obviously relaxed. What Qin Weibai said was the original words of that day. What happened later was also some small fun between husband and wife that only he and Qin Weibai knew. In Li Tianlan's memory, it seemed that from that time, he began to dominate Qin Weibai and really let his goddess become his woman. Under his discipline, Qin Weibai also became more and more obedient. Are you planning something bad? Qin Weibai touched Li Tianlan's chin. Her face was red, but she looked into his eyes very bravely. The memory of the first time in his mind began to become more and more chaotic. But it was only the memory of that night. The memory after that was very clear. Li Tianlan's test and suspicion had been very obvious in the question just now. But what Qin Weibai was least afraid of was this kind of test in all kinds of details that only the two of them knew. This was the most effective thing that could prove something. She answered without hesitation, and most directly felt Li Tianlan's relaxation. No, nothing. Li Tianlan shook his head subconsciously. Then tell me what you were thinking about just now. Qin Weibai touched Li Tianlan's head and tried to make her voice stable. I can't explain it clearly. Just now, Li Tianlan seemed to be thinking. Wild imagination, right? He held Qin Weibai in his arms. His eyes seemed to be more sober than before, with thinking and incomparably deep. Qin Weibai bit her lip and took out her trump card. Carry me back to the room. She held Li Tianlan's neck and gently bit her little white teeth. I thought you were angry just now. It scared me to death. Today, I will punish you well. Li Tianlan held Qin Weibai up. He would never refuse this kind of punishment. He would never refuse this kind of punishment. The pencil scratched on the paper. Shenyuan Wushang wrote this sentence, and then there was a long pause. It was thinking that paused. The tip of the pencil was still moving, but what was written was not words, but a large number of smears. He could weave a story. But the privacy between Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai was a forbidden area that he absolutely could not touch. So he let the pencil in his hand scribble on the paper page after page. When the pencil stopped, he reread the story he had woven. The story was so detailed and long-winded that it added up to tens of millions of words. Strictly speaking, it was no longer a story, but a huge and complicated web. To be more precise, every detail in the story and every psychological activity of the characters were logic. The logic of the characters and the overall logic of the story. No matter whether the logic in it was normal or not, under the confinement of the logic model, all the logic was reasonable. Shenyuan Wushang put down the pencil and put the book in front of him back into the logic model. After thinking for a while, He took the book out and put it back again. After several times, he shook his head with a somewhat complicated expression. So, Her Highness Qin Weibai's memory is messed up and revealed a flaw? Xing Tian stood behind Xianyuan Wushang. His huge body glowed with a blue light similar to the logic model, and his voice was a little low. It should not be a memory disorder. It's just that the positioning is a little messed up. Xianyuan Wushang was a little speechless. I don't know what the specific reason is. The weaving traces have been erased. It should be something private between the couple. Sister-in-law's body has further recovered in the headquarters of the Lin clan, so there is a tendency for her memory to merge here. She just couldn't distinguish Li Tianlan and Dongqing Huangtu. The things in the two spaces are a little blurred, so she took Dongqing Huangtu's thing as Li Tianlan's. That's about it, so it made Big Brother suspicious. What impact will it have? Xing Tian was a little confused. I don't know. Xianyuan Wushang smiled bitterly, separated the logic model again, and fused half of the logic model and the pencil in his hand with Xing Tian again. I can only try my best to suppress this matter, but what kind of person is Big Brother? Now that he has doubts, I'm afraid this matter can't be suppressed for long. Xing Tian was silent. Ensuring Li Tianlan's smooth return was the most important task of the space-time corridor at present. Sending the ninth prince here had fully proved the attitude of the space-time corridor toward this matter. There really could not be any accidents. But Qin Weibai, anything that Her Highness did could have a huge impact and accident on His Majesty Li Tianlan. How is Her Highness? Xing Tian asked in a low voice. Actually, she's fine. Xianyuan Wushang thought for a moment. But it takes time, which is what I'm most afraid of. He pursed his lips, and his eyes became more and more helpless. Recently, Qin Weibai had been making continuous progress in the spiritual field, some of which she didn't even realize herself. All this showed that Her Highness, who was currently in the headquarters of the Lin clan, was constantly recovering. Now the Lin clan was worried about the injury of the Master of Samsara Palace, but in Xianyuan Wushang's mind, as long as that injury was stabilized, it was the least worrying. The reason why the Master of Samsara Palace hadn't regained consciousness was that her consciousness was now trapped in her own space of consciousness. The space similar to the eternal furnace was still changing. Xianyuan Wushang left a test bench there, which could speed up the recovery process of the Master of Samsara Palace to a certain extent. But the most important thing was to speed up the process of her return, at least to let her realize something. The Lin clan had never given up on the treatment of the Master of Samsara Palace. Xianyuan Wushang had a detailed understanding of this. He had estimated the time it would take for the Master of Samsara Palace to be in the depths of his consciousness. Combined with the current situation of the Master of Samsara Palace, he estimated that it would take about 5 years for the injury of the Master of Samsara Palace to completely stabilize and then wake up. About 20 years later, Qin Weibai could initially return. With the awakening of the Master of Samsara Palace, Qin Weibai could now also find Li Tianlan and the tree in her dreams. Xianyuan Wushang was very clear about what the tree meant. It was the foundation of Qin Weibai's authority, but now it had been polluted, or it could be said that it had been severely damaged. And the virtual shadow sitting under the tree was the most important divine form in Li Tianlan's martial arts authority, 9 deaths. When the Master of Samsara Palace woke up, it meant the beginning of the return. Her authority would naturally recover, and 9 deaths would smoothly leave Qin Weibai's space of consciousness and return to Li Tianlan. With this divine form, Li Tianlan could smoothly set foot in the real supreme domain and completely master the core characteristics of the level 8 authority of martial arts. At that time, he and Li Tianlan would join forces and could already fight against the will of the world in a real environment to a certain extent. Thus, he would tell Li Tianlan most of the truth and let Li Tianlan begin to formally return. And before this period, that was, within 5 years, Li Tianlan could not go to see the Master of Samsara Palace no matter what. Both of their authorities had begun to awaken initially, and they were in the process of formally finding themselves. Their own authorities were extremely fragile. Qin Weibai could be a buffer, but once Li Tianlan got close to the real Master of Samsara Palace, Their authorities were likely to have a fundamental conflict. One was the founder of the neutral camp. The other was the only supreme person in the human clan who currently held the peak authority of the Order camp. There were only two possibilities for the two to meet in this state. Either they merged with each other and became one person, or their authorities were as incompatible as fire and water, and they both died. Either result was not something that the space-time corridor could bear. Qin Weibai's buffer was exactly right. But once Li Tianlan found out the truth that Qin Weibai hid, in the next 5 years, in order to stabilize Li Tianlan, they could only tell Li Tianlan that the master of Samsara Palace had died. It was a deception, but it was a last resort. How would Li Tianlan react after knowing the news? That was what Xianyuan Wushang dared not think about. If we tell His Majesty that Her Highness has died, the corner of Xing Tian's mouth moved. His Majesty may not be able to bear this kind of blow. Be confident. He definitely can't bear it. Xianyuan Wushang said with a wry smile, "You won't understand the feelings between big brother and sister-in-law. Their bond is too deep. From the beginning to the present, if they could really let it go, they wouldn't be them." In the first battle, all kinds of information showed that sister-in-law had a chance to survive, but she forcibly affected the situation of the final battle and barely fought to a situation where both sides suffered. In order not to let her die completely, Big Brother separated the divine body and the 9 deaths to suppress her authority core. When he was seriously injured, he separated the core again. At that time, he didn't even make it to the end of the world. Now, they have been reincarnated several times in a row, and they barely returned. But this kind of bond is impossible for Big Brother to let go. And in this life, most of Big Brother's current achievements come from sister-in-law's support. If we lie to him that sister-in-law has died, God knows what will happen. But no matter what happens, it will definitely have a huge impact on the process of his return. Xing Tian thought for a while and said softly, "But now there is Qin Weibai. Does your Highness also think that the current Qin Weibai and the master of Samsara Palace are two different people?" "Of course they are the same person." Xianyuan Wushang sighed and said, "But the premise is that they can only be one person when they are together. If one dies and the other lives, then she is not her, and she is not her." Xing Tian was silent. After a long while, he said softly, "Can you still delay it? This is the only chance." Xianyuan Wushang shook his head and said, "Now Big Brother has noticed it. Even if he hasn't officially returned, the real mark is there. I can only make up what happened today and let the model give today's matter reasonable logic. But even so, it is difficult to dispel Big Brother's idea. It is hard to say what will happen next. It depends on when Big Brother realizes it." If, Xing Tian's low and worried voice sounded. "If His Majesty really can't bear it, there can be no if." Xianyuan Wushang shook his head and said, "I'm afraid this matter can't be hidden. In the end, Big Brother will inevitably be deceived, so we can only use other forces to stimulate his spirit." "For example?" Xing Tian asked. "For example, Big Brother's daughter." Xianyuan Wushang said softly, "It seems that we should find sister-in-law Yuetong." Chapter 1247. Where was Wang Yuetong now? The Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace were eager to know the answer to this question. Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tian also wanted to know the answer now. But it was just a thought. Compared with Li Tianlan and Wang Xingxiao, who tried to find a needle in a haystack regardless of manpower, material and financial resources, Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tian knew the result from the beginning. It was impossible to find her. Even if Zhongzhou State, no, even billions of people in the world were placed in front of Li Tianlan and asked him to look at them one by one, Li Tianlan could not find Wang Yuetong. When she left Beihai alone, no one could understand the sadness and grievance in Wang Yuetong's heart. She could not stand in the position of her family to be Li Tianlan's enemy. She could not stand on Li Tianlan's side against the family that gave birth to her and raised her. The moment Li Tianlan set foot in Beihai, Wang Yuetong herself had become a joke of the Wang family of Beihai. The Wang family of Beihai had reasons not to compromise. Li Tianlan also had personal affairs that he could not let go. Wang Yuetong was caught in the middle. The two sides that squeezed her might have more or less considered her existence, but in the end, they did not compromise. Because they could not let go and could not retreat. So on Mount Dibing that year, Li Tianlan's sword directly pierced Wang Yuetong's heart. At that moment, the reality was so naked and bloody in front of Wang Yuetong. There were some things that she really could not change or escape. She was caught in the middle and could only be in a dilemma. So she used her body and even her life to face Li Tianlan's edge. Death was death. She was not afraid of death. Why would she care about love and family? She did not care about her own dilemma. She just intended to destroy everything she had in exchange for Li Tianlan and Mount Dibing not to be in a dilemma. After that sword, Emperor Dong's sweeping across Beihai completely came to an end. It was like an incomparably grand farce. Silver moon sky light town Beihai. But after that sword, Li Tianlan did not kill her in the end. The fact was undeniable. If it were not for Wang Yuetong, no one could be sure what the whole Mount Dibing, all the elites, all the forces, and all the foundations would be tormented by Li Tianlan, who was full of killing intent at that time. No matter what it was, at least it wouldn't be like 2 years ago when they finally gave up. Li Tianlan finally took a step back. In Wang Yuetong's mind, all the affection, love, promise, and future between her and Li Tianlan were completely shattered when Li Tianlan took a step back. There was nothing left, not even a drop. Although the Wang family of Beihai suffered heavy losses and lost face, at least because of Li Tianlan's retreat, its foundation was preserved. This was what Wang Yuetong had protected at all costs. It was also because of this desperate action that Wang Yuetong thought she had done everything she could and repaid the Wang family of Beihai for raising her. What else could he do after that? Those who should be opposing each other were still opposing each other. If he stayed, would he continue to make things difficult for both parties and himself? That sword strike broke the relationship between her and Li Tianlan, as well as the cause and effect between her and the Wang family of Beihai. So when she left Mount Dibing, her mood should be very complicated. There was reluctance, sadness, and regret. But it should also be very resolute. He didn't put himself, Li Tianlan, or Beihai in a difficult position. No one knew whether she was calm or relaxed. But in this situation, Xinyuan Wushang was sure that Wang Yuetong really wanted to hide. "We can't find her," Xing Tian said with certainty. "Yes, we can't find her." Xinyuan Wushang sighed and suddenly smiled. "It's unrealistic to find Yuetong directly, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a direction." It was still possible to find Wang Yuetong before he and Xing Tian arrived, with the power of the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace. But after they came here, this possibility was basically a theoretical possibility. Perhaps from the first second they arrived here, some people's eyes had fallen on Wang Yuetong and her daughter, Princess Royal of the Time Corridor, a peak expert who cheated authority. Xinyuan Wushang had confirmed that Princess Royal was now with Wang Yuetong's daughter. This was not a rumor, but a fact told to him by Princess Royal herself. Wang Yuetong really wanted to hide. Once Princess Royal confirmed her mother's thoughts, would others still want to find her? It was simply a fool's talk. What did a peak expert who cheated authority mean? It meant that even if Wang Yuetong stood in front of Li Tianlan now, he could not see her. If Princess Royal wanted to, she could make the whole world completely forget that Wang Yuetong had ever existed. All traces of her existence would disappear, and everyone's memory of her would fade away. It was an unbridled deception, and it was flawless. Under the shroud of the Princess Royal's will, not to mention the fact that he had already been killed. Suppressed by the real environment, Xinyuan Wushang could hardly find Wang Yuetong even at his peak. "But we can try to get the eldest princess to come find us." Xinyuan Wushang smiled honestly. Xing Tian's massive body shuddered involuntarily. When King Wei obtained a portion of the heart-shattering sword's sword intent, we were able to confirm that the energy of the heart-shattering sword originated from the Eastern Mountain. Xing Tian said, "It's just that we can confirm it. It might not be true. If our perception is deceived, then the energy of the heart-shattering sword may also originate from Star State." But we were deceived, So we were sure that it was in the eastern mountain. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head. It's hard to start from this aspect. And if we want to find Princess Royal, there's no need to play those fancy tricks. It's best to find a way to meet her honestly. Your Highness, don't you have anything that can directly contact Princess Royal? Xing Tian was a little confused. Why do you think I have such a thing? Xianyuan Wushang smiled helplessly. Xing Tian did not speak. Feng Qingwu, Princess Royal of the Time Corridor. Even in the space-time corridor, she was a symbolic existence. The first princess rarely went out and never interfered with anything. Over the course of a long time, she could only be seen in a few battles. Most of the time, she didn't exist in the space-time corridor. Does Princess Royal have any friends? Xing Tian asked. She has no friends. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head slightly. Not even acquaintances. After the ancient war, she admitted that she had committed a grave sin and sealed herself in the imperial palace, which is equivalent to cutting off all contact with the outside world. Then this time, Xing Tian was stunned. Xianyuan Wushang took a deep look at him and did not hide anything. Xing Tian was the logical core of one of his privileges. In other words, Xing Tian was a part of him, so there was naturally no need to be cautious or suspicious. Of course it's to atone for her sins. The end is coming, so Princess Royal intends to make a key for herself. Xing Tian seemed to understand. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head and said slowly, I'll leave this matter to you. Eastern Mountain is not trustworthy, but the logical starting point is very obvious, and that is the North Sea. You can weave other logics from this starting point. When you really get close to or touch the truth, Princess Royal will naturally notice, and then you can find a way to let her meet us. If she doesn't want to, tell her that there are some problems in the process of His Majesty's return, and she will come. Xing Tian nodded and wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. If you have something to say, say it. Xianyuan Wushang walked back to his seat, opened a bottle of his favorite Coke, and said without looking up, Princess Royal is with His Majesty's daughter? Xing Tian deliberated over his tone. Xianyuan Wushang looked at Xing Tian and was a little confused. What's the problem? Strictly speaking, Princess Royal is also Big Brother's daughter. So, Xing Tian said softly, has Princess Royal merged with His Majesty's daughter? Or has she replaced her? That won't happen. Xianyuan Wushang laughed. I don't know much about Princess Royal's authority, but generally speaking, she and Big Brother's daughter should be together in one body and two souls. As for what will happen in the final stage, no one can tell. If she wants to be the key, she must do something that she has never done before. But there is a high probability that the two will become two independent individuals, but they can also merge into a whole. The thoughts, memories, and souls between the two are all interconnected. Like Qin Weibai and the Master of Samsara Palace? Xing Tian asked. Pretty much the same. Who can know the specifics? If I knew, I would have chosen Fraud Authority a long time ago. In terms of this authority, in the whole neutral camp, only this Princess Royal can reach above level 9. 5. Now King of Deception can't do it. Even Big Brother, who had all the authority at the beginning, didn't reach this level. He opened the drawer, took out a document, and looked at it carefully. This was the latest information sent from the laboratory of Emperor Dong's palace. It was recorded 12 hours ago, and it was the latest changes in Dongqing Rushi and Sidu Wanjie's body data. Xianyuan Wushang looked at it quietly. He glanced through most of the data, including some data that the experts in the laboratory paid great attention to. What he paid most attention to were the 3 new data that appeared at the bottom of the document. Even the experts in the laboratory didn't know what they represented. Xianyuan Wushang provided Emperor Dong's palace with a special instrument to detect these 3 data. No one knew the specific function of the instrument. Also, no one knew the meaning of the 3 data except Xianyuan Wushang. 3 sets of data. The first represented spiritual strength. The second one represented the activity of thinking. The third represented the deepest level of subconsciousness. Xianyuan Wushang glanced at these 3 vital data and felt a little regretful. It will take about 2 years for this sister-in-law to wake up. Only then can she be more stable in the future. 2 years? It's hard. I'm afraid things can't be suppressed for so long. Tribulation's situation is good. He will wake up in half a year. He shook his head. It's more reliable to find Yuetong. Why don't you believe in Her Highness Qin Weibai? Maybe His Majesty won't find anything in the end. Xing Tian tried to make a last-ditch struggle. If possible, he really didn't want to deal with that Princess Royal. Of course, I don't doubt this sister-in-law's means. Xinyuan Wushang said softly, but I don't doubt Jiang Shangyu's IQ. He also knows about this. It depends on when he takes action. Chapter 1248. At 5 o'clock in the morning, before dawn, Wang Xingxiao had already walked into a breakfast shop on the edge of Xingzhou City. The pace of life in Xingzhou was very slow. Few breakfast shops opened before 7 o'clock in the morning. If Wang Xingxiao didn't make an appointment in person, this shop with a special Rujiamo sign would usually open at 7:30 in the morning and close at 9:30 in the morning. It only sold 500 Rujiamos a day. Although it was a lot, it was never for money. It was in short supply all year round. Wang Xingxiao ordered 20 Rujiamos and 2 bowls of mutton soup. In the rising steam from the mutton soup, he picked up the Rujiamo and took a bite. The steamed bun was crispy, the meat was tender, and the fat was moderate. It was fragrant but not greasy. I haven't eaten it for a long time. Wang Xingxiao sighed softly. I've eaten it for so many years since I was a child, but I'm not tired of it. I don't know whether I'm great or Uncle Yuan's cooking is great. Of course I'm great. The middle-aged boss in an apron, who looked to be in his 50s, brought over 2 freshly made Rujiamos and scolded them with a smile. You 2 little rabbits ate here for several months in a row. At first, you could eat 5 at a time, and then you could eat 8 at a time. Not only did you refuse to pay, but you also brought people here to eat and drink for free, including Yuetong, Tang Shi, Song Ci, and even Wang Xiaoyao. Later, I asked your father for money, but he didn't want to pay. I almost fell out with him. Then you have to blame Brother Jiang. He said he was close to you and didn't need to pay. Wang Xingxiao laughed and looked at Di Jiang, who was sitting opposite him, calm and quiet. The middle-aged boss slapped Di Jiang on the back. I haven't seen you for more than 2 years. Where have you been? Is my Rujiamo not delicious anymore, or are you tired of the old? You seem to have changed a lot. Are you pretending to be mature? Cough, cough, cough. Di Jiang was busy drinking mutton soup. There were a lot of chili in the soup, and it tasted ecstatic. The slap made Di Jiang choke and cough, and his delicious face turned red. The boss laughed and got up to fill a small bowl of clear soup. He condensed frost in his hand to cool the soup and handed it to Di Jiang. Drink it quickly. Wang Xingxiao looked at this scene and smiled without saying a word. The boss here was surnamed Yuan, and his first name was Quan. He had been serving Mount Dibing in Beihai since his great-grandfather's generation. In the hearts of the Wang family of Beihai, he could be said to be a true descendant. Yuan Quan's grandfather had been the protector of the Patriarch of Beihai and was also one of the 3 superiors of the Invincible Realm in that generation of the Wang family of Beihai. After he died of old age, his name was engraved on the stone of Formidable Person. Yuan Quan's father was one of the several people in charge of the Beihai Physics Laboratory in the previous generation. In Yuan Quan's generation, he used to be one of the top superiors of Mount Dibing. His strength had reached the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. His code name was Flying Ape. He was famous for his speed and was also well known in the Dark World. However, his foundation was seriously injured in a mission more than 10 years ago, and he barely retained the strength of the early stage of the ice-condensing realm. After Yuan Quan was injured, he stayed in Mount Dibing for a few years. He really couldn't stand the loneliness, so he simply brought his family to Xingzhou City and opened a breakfast shop. Now it could be regarded as the signature of the breakfast industry in Xingzhou. The detached villa left to him on Mount Dibing was still there, and now his son basically lived there. He had an excellent relationship with Wang Xingxiao and Di Jiang. Even though he left Mount Dibing in Wang Tianzong's eyes, he was also a confidant. His son, Yuan Shu, graduated from Beihai Military Academy 6 years ago. He had joined the Beihai Corps while he was still in school and was awarded the rank of second lieutenant. After graduation, he soared to the sky. In just 6 years, he was already a lieutenant colonel. After Wang Xianxia became the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, the Beihai Corps recruited more than 300,000 soldiers in more than 2 years. Yuan Quan's son, Yuan Shu, was one of the main people in charge of this recruitment. It was self-evident what this meant. I just got out, and I haven't even had time to see the light of day again. You almost slapped me back again. Dijiang rolled his eyes and took a big bite of the rujiamo. After more than 2 years in Beihai prison, he really wanted to have a bite of it for a long time. What do you mean by just got out? Did you commit a crime? Yuan Quan grinned. He didn't pay much attention to Mount Dibbing now. To cultivate my mind and body. Dijiang smiled. His eyes were deep and satisfied. More than 2 years. I've gained a lot. Tut, Yuan Quan sighed with some regret. I thought you were caught and thrown into Beihai prison by the Nalin family because you failed to rape the little girl of the Nalin family. The little girl of the Nalin family, Dijiang's eyes dimmed slightly. Realizing that he had said something he shouldn't have said, Yuan Quan coughed awkwardly, stood up, and said, "You eat first, I'll continue to cook. I'll add soup and meat. You eat slowly." Wang Xianxia smiled bitterly. He looked at Dijiang and didn't speak. Dijiang drank the soup in silence. Compared with more than 2 years ago, he didn't seem to have changed much, but he did. More than 2 years ago, no matter how steady he was, he occasionally had the arrogance and high spirits of his youth. Double Thunder Veins entered the invincible realm at the age of 36, came from a wealthy family, was the chief student of Sword Emperor, and was handsome. Dijiang did have the capital to be proud and arrogant. Today, 2 years later, he was nearly 40 years old. Some of the situation and spirit in those years had gradually disappeared with these 2 years of imprisonment. Now Dijiang seemed to have completely settled down and was as quiet as an ocean. Wang Xianxia didn't know what to say. He stirred the mutton soup in front of him in silence. She went to Dunnan, didn't she? Dijiang lowered his head and whispered, "Did she come back?" Wang Xianxia shook his head with a bitter smile. With her character, although she went to Tiannan, there was basically no news about her. I guess she rarely left the lab. Beihai's silver eyes. Beihai's Nalin Shuri. When the genius woman with silver eyes was still in the Beihai lab, Dijiang was one of the few people who could take her out of the lab. Dijiang liked her. He had never denied it. Nalin Shuri, who was so focused and pure that she looked a little cold, never resented getting along with Dijiang. But she just didn't resent it. The relationship between the two had been lukewarm for many years. Maybe they were friends. They were closer. Maybe in her heart, Dijiang was her big brother. But that was all. Now that Nalin Shuri had gone to the Southern Heaven region, it meant that if there were no accidents, it would be very difficult for Emperor Jiang to see those enchanting silver eyes in the future. The faintly discernible connection between the two had been completely broken. Dijiang ate the rujiamo and suddenly smiled. He asked, "What are you going to do with me?" "What do you think, Brother Jiang?" Wang Xianxia wisely changed the topic with Dijiang. More than 2 years ago, under the pressure of Wang Qinglei and Wang Xiaoyao, Dijiang was finally not expelled from Beihai, but he was imprisoned in Beihai prison. The reason? Just because Li Tianlan said something to Dijiang at that time. In fact, Li Tianlan just moved his mouth and didn't say anything. This seemingly ridiculous little trick caused great pressure to Dijiang in the internal environment of the Wang family of Beihai at that time. It was because Dijiang couldn't say what Li Tianlan said at that time. Someone in Beihai wanted to execute him. Or be expelled from Beihai. Temporarily imprisoning him in Beihai prison was the best choice Wang Xianxia could make under absolute pressure. The past 2 years were definitely not a waste for Dijiang. He lived next door to Wang Tianzong. He could feel the sword intent of the Chosen One all the time. The sword intent condensed bit by bit, extremely detailed and clear from the initial chaos. This was equivalent to showing every detail of the 6 paths of reincarnation sword of the Wang family of Beihai in front of Dijiang, and what was shown was the essence of Wang Tianzong's swordsmanship. Di Jiang, before entering Beihai prison, used a saber. The two ideas of using a saber and a sword were completely integrated with him in more than 2 years. His realm, which had just entered the invincible realm, quickly stabilized, and then began to sprint toward the peak of the invincible realm. His martial arts were gradually changing and maturing. It was like a saber but not a saber, like a sword but not a sword. He was proficient in both saber and sword, plus his original double thunder veins. Now his incredible power and his own martial arts were enough to become the real pillar of the Wang family of Beihai. Who was his opponent before entering Beihai prison? The opponent he could compare with at that time was Saint, who entered the invincible realm at about the same time as him, and Dawn of Purgatory of Heaven Capital, who entered the invincible realm at about the same time as him. Now he ranked at the bottom of the divine list. However, the opponent in his heart right now was the Dark Queen Moongaze. It was Wang Xiaoyao, who had confirmed that he had entered the peak of the invincible realm. It was Li Shi, who had entered the peak of the invincible realm for more than 20 years. He was the so-called Heavenly Imperial Guardian, Gu Xingyun. Now Di Jiang was indeed a little bit away from the real peak of the invincible realm. This gap could be said to be a lot, but it could also be said to be very small. It was so big that an ordinary invincible realm expert could never surpass it, and so small that his dual thunder veins could make up for it. In terms of strength alone, his strength had far surpassed that of the peak of the invincible realm. This was the trump card with which he was confident that he could fight against most of the experts today. How about I go to Tianan? Di Jiang asked with a smile. Tianan can't hold on much longer, can it? He went to the southern heaven. Of course, there would be a place to stay. If Tianan doesn't work, we can only abandon it. Wang Xianxia shook his head. The situation over there is not optimistic. It's useless for you to go there. The currently Tianlan was completely different from 2 years ago. Brother Jiang, don't underestimate your enemy. There's a reason why he can climb to the top of the divine list. I fought with him not long ago, and I couldn't find any flaws in him at all. Wang Xianxia paused and suddenly frowned. I even have a feeling that when he fought with me, he didn't use his strength at all. I don't mean that he didn't take it seriously, but his every move now seems not to consume any physical strength at all. How is that possible? Di Jiang shook his head with a smile. Maybe it's an illusion. Wang Xianxia smiled bitterly. But now it's certain that you are no match for him. Maybe you can approach him in strength, but you can't make up for the gap in other aspects. Even if we join hands, we can't. Who said that I will go to Tianan to fight against Li Tianlan? Di Jiang stood up and served himself another bowl of mutton soup. He didn't need to be polite with Yuan Quan, so he directly scooped a spoonful of mutton. If I don't fight against him, how can I see Nalan? Wang Xianxia said blandly, and if you go to Tianan, what identity will I give you? After second uncle left Mount Dibbing can't afford any trouble now. Now when you are officially needed, I'm alone and under a lot of pressure. All right. Di Jiang thought for a moment, threw mutton oil chili garlic mashed into the soup, and said with a smile, how's the preparation for this election? Not bad. Wang Xianxia bit the Rujiamo and said with some regret, I was going to enter the election with the help of the conflict between the academy and the new group, so that at least I can swallow some of the benefits of the Flourishing Age Fund. Tangshi has also been preparing for this these days. But it's a little strange these days. The contradiction between the two sides seems to have eased, although it hasn't completely eased. So when are you going to enter the election? Di Jiang asked. Wait for an opportunity? I can't afford to wait. Wang Xianxia said in a deep voice, since there is no opportunity, we can create a breakthrough ourselves and enter the election directly. But Di Jiang said blandly. Pudding. Wang Xianxiao's voice was firm. Di Jiang suddenly raised his eyebrows. The Prince Group? Now the leader of Huading was one of the banners of the Prince Group. Attacking Huading naturally meant attacking the Prince Group. Wang Xianxia sneered. How can it be so easy to take Wuyue away? If they dare to reach out, we will naturally fight back. If we can't protect Wuyue, we can use Huading to exchange. In this election, it is the core task to let Uncle Wen enter the cabinet, and taking Huading is the strategic goal. Only in this way can we not lose this election. Di Jiang was silent. Now the biggest goal of the Wang family of Beihai and the Southeast Group was to not lose. It was impossible to win. The combination of Wang Qinglei and Wang Xiaoyao could not be said to be invincible in the world, but their sudden betrayal did stab the Southeast Group in the heart. It was a pretty good result to be able to stabilize the situation. As long as they could take Huading and promote Wen Siyuan to the top, the Southeast Group would not lose this election. In such a complicated situation, in many cases, as long as they did not lose, they would actually win. What's your specific plan? Di Jiang asked. I already have some information here. Wang Xianxia smiled. It was provided by second uncle. If he wants to protect Huading now, he must pay the price. This information can make a lot of noise in Huading. Information? Di Jiang frowned tightly. Only involving the Prince Group? How is that possible? Wang Xianxia shook his head gently. Huading has always been a mixed bag of good and bad people, and the situation is very chaotic. Once this thing breaks out, it will definitely be investigated. Under the strict investigation, the Giant Group, the North Group, and the academics can't escape. Di Jiang took a deep look at him. Just be prepared. The election is getting closer and closer, and the chaos is inevitable. But this time we are the ones to lead. Even if they want to settle accounts with us, they will probably have to wait until after the election. Wang Xingxiao's voice was gentle. Moreover, the focus is not only on Huading. I never believe that Li Tianlan will really behave. He looked at Di Jiang and raised the corner of his mouth with a strange smile. The information in my hand will be handed in a few days. When things break out, we will take the initiative to attack. Brother Jiang, you are the vanguard. I plan to let you go to Wuyue. What do you think? You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.